allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juggling of the agenda here because we have some scheduled presentations. And so we'll do the AP Scholar recognition and the, citizens request to speak. Those will be after our equity proposals. And so I'm going to turn over to Dr. Ouellette. We'll start with the public health presentation.
Can we go ahead and have Ellie's screen shared? So we have Ellie Clausen, the epidemiologist for St. Croix County, is here tonight. She's going to be giving a presentation on some data, and then short presentation on some data, what's going on in the county and even the district, and then giving an opportunity for board members to ask questions. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ellie. Can you hear us all right, Ellie?
I can. Thank you, Nick. Hi, and thank you for having me this evening. I will be giving a brief update on the COVID situation within St. Croix County. As we get started off, here's just a summary of what is going on in the county, a little bit of a timeline as people have noticed our dashboard online. I hope everyone can see the bottom row, and if you can't, please let me know and I will adjust. So as of today, the end of our count today, we had 123 cases reported into the county today. This is obviously up from just a week ago when we had 64 cases. Now note, that's just a day, a point in time, but our total confirmed cases is up 30% from last week. We did unfortunately have 2 additional deaths, COVID-related deaths reported to us today, which brings our total to 14 total deaths. And we currently have 34 people within the county hospitalized. Half of them are hospitalized here in St. Croix County and half of them outside of the county. So what is our trend in new cases per day? We are looking at a dramatic rise. I think everyone is aware COVID is on the rise. What we have is, this is as of numbers yesterday, but we're looking at 76.3 cases a day. That's our 7-day average, which is obviously going to go up as we had over 100 again today. But kind of what does that mean in the long run? That means the county is looking at over 1,000 new cases by the Monday before Thanksgiving, which does paint a troubling picture for the status of COVID in our county. Kind of how do we measure that in terms of metric? In looking at case incidence, which is a great way to look at comparisons within other counties, other states, within our nation, is looking at a 7-day average versus 100,000 people, which kind of takes away the population piece to it. We currently are looking at a case incidence of 83.9, which is up 45%. If you're looking at these Harvard metrics that are here as well on the screen, these are from the Harvard Institute, and they consider red level, which is considered uncontrolled spread in a community at greater than 25 daily new cases per 100,000 people. So we have exceeded that. Where are these cases in St. Croix County currently? So right now we're looking at the active cases. So these are people with present disease within St. Croix County. 30% of that active disease occurs within Hudson, followed closely by Richmond at 23%. We used to have about 20% in Richmond and about 50% of disease in Hudson, and that has actually, the disease has spread within St. Croix County has distributed within the county greater. So we are looking at Somerset now having 8%, followed by Baldwin, and then River Falls and Glenwood City. So within Hudson itself, where is the active disease? So we have distributed the majority of it in Hudson proper, followed about by 25% in Hudson Township. And then we're moving into unassigned, is unfortunately just those who were not able to be matched by address, but do have a Hudson address. So then we have North Hudson and Troy Township at 6%, followed by St. Joseph's at 5%. Now, if we look at the age groups, so as you'll see, this graph goes from 0 to 9 years of age up to 90 plus. These are the distribution from September to November as we have it. And so this is a percentage. So we're not having to look at the low case numbers in November that have come about, but in percentage of where the disease is happening. And we're finding the greatest numbers in kind of our 20 to 60-year-olds, kind of our most mobile range, those people who are actively moving about within the community, we're finding the greatest spread. Now looking by those 4 to 18 years of age, kind of where is that spread again? And again, you see a trend towards the more mobile they are, the higher amount of disease we have. So this is actually number of cases cumulatively within St. Croix County by age, excuse me. So this is a comparison here between Hudson and Richmond in terms of cases, again, 4 to 18 years old. These are confirmed cases. So I guess I want to make myself clear. Any case numbers I have referenced in this presentation are confirmed cases. So they are laboratory confirmed cases reported to us by hospitals and laboratories through our electronic disease surveillance system. So these confirmed cases, we obviously are seeing a great rise in the number of cases that reflects what's going on in the community as a whole. And then in November, we actually are seeing Hudson and Richmond having so far equal number of cases in 4 to 18 years of age. Now that is the end of my presentation on the situation in St. Croix County. I'm going to stop sharing now and open it up for questions.
Anyone have questions for Ms. Clausen? Heather?
Mr. President, could you just update us? What's the current situation for contact tracing? How is that being done, and how what kind of a response are you seeing from folks to whom you are reaching out to or others are reaching out to?
I apologize. Was that a question for me or?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
Question
okay.
for Ellie.
Okay. Well, two things. Number one, unfortunately, the county is no longer able to do personalized contact tracing. Now, contacts, we call contact tracing those who have been identified as a close contact. So when we call a positive case and they tell us who has been, according to the guidelines, within 6 feet for 15 minutes or greater, has shared a hug, so forth, those are considered close contacts. Unfortunately, as a county, we are no longer able to do the contact tracing portion of our, just due to our great number of actual positive cases. With the positive cases, we are finding on the majority, they are responsive, at least to hear our guidance and to agree to isolate in order to stop the spread.
Other questions?
Mr. President.
Yes.
Ellie, with regards to information that might be available to our public, we've had a number of questions with regards to just being able to see COVID data, numbers, counts. Where would the public go to see this information? Or frankly, if they have questions, how do they get those answered?
Right. Thanks for your question. Number one, our data cases by day are posted on our dashboard. The distribution by age is also posted on our dashboard. Our current case numbers, cumulatively active, recovered, are also posted on the dashboard. They are updated daily. We are transitioning to a new dashboard in which graphics and more information is possible to be shared with the public. As to having the actual numbers themselves, There is data for our county. DHS does release data. They count it in a different way. We count by day reported to us as a public health department. They take a little bit longer in their counting system. And so those numbers do not necessarily always reflect exactly day by day matchup. But as to our St. Croix County public health data, at this time, we don't have any process for sharing the actual numbers themselves.
Yes, Heather.
Are you able to share any information about research that's being done by epidemiologists or others around kind of the role of asymptomatic spread? I mean, the numbers that you have shared with us obviously are folks who have tested positive, and we don't have a way to know how many people are positive, because if they don't test, we don't know. But where do you have, does the county or the state have data it's leaning on, research it's leaning on, or encouraging us to look at regarding the role of asymptomatic, that students might play in asymptomatic spread to the community at large?
Currently, we are collecting data on those individuals who do test and do report being asymptomatic. The state as well is collecting the same data. I am meeting with a consortium of epidemiologists throughout the Western region this Thursday, and I can check in if anyone has anything promising or significant to share. But at this moment, I do know, due to the difficulty in tracing asymptomatics should they not be tested, and right now the inability to do widespread testing, regardless of being symptomatic or not, is not currently in our wheelhouse. So unfortunately, there isn't a lot of promising research that I have come across.
Sue?
Yes, Allie, thank you. How often and to whom does our data get sent to for a larger compilation of information?
So our data is continuously being incorporated into a large consortium of information. Where I'm pulling data from is called the Wisconsin Electronic Disease Surveillance System. And so this is the system that all counties across Wisconsin used for COVID case reporting. And then each time a new case is reported and interviewed, the data collected from that interview is then compiled into a greater database for the state of Wisconsin. And so the DHS, that is where, if you look on their dashboards, that's where they're garnering all this information.
I have a question, and then I'll turn it over to Rob. But my question is, does public health have a recommendation for school districts to be administering temperature checks, for instance?
So I think at this time, there is a lot of new information coming out about and regarding. I know Wisconsin DPI just released some information regarding, and another organization, I apologize, it's slipping out of, released kind of recommendations on how fever is not an effective tool in the school situation. Now, I am not going to represent public health. I am not the health officer. And so there is a lot of research in that field to be considered, but currently I do not know if, I'm unable to say if there is a true public health recommendation.
Okay, Rob?
This question is for Nick. With regards to the information, and you more than any of us are familiar with the questions we've been getting from our public, our parents. How is there anything you need more of or different from the county?
Ellie and I, we talk every Monday with our superintendent consortium. We've been asking for more grade breakdown stuff, and what you saw today is the kind of stuff that we're getting, which has been good. This is data that the county holds on to, and I think once their new dashboard is up and running, we'll have a lot more data at our disposal as we work through it. We're tracking our best way to track our data is just to look at our building level data and things like that. We don't have access to any more data than anybody else would have publicly. And then, Ellie's ability to break it down by every age level and by municipality really kind of helps us understand those things. I was wondering, Ellie, if you could talk just a little bit about, the community spread piece. And, our biggest concern, I think, when schools opened was our school is going to contribute to community spread. They may absolutely still be community contributing, but when you're seeing cases in school age kids, what are you primarily seeing it attributed to, or where they're getting the cases or getting infection
Right.
from?
And that's a great question. And that is data that I am definitely working through, especially in other data Nick has requested. We can touch on that. But what we're really seeing is the spread happening in those older age ranges. So like we said, the 20 to the 60-year-olds, with the majority of our school age children actually turning positive due to a positive already in their household, more than likely a parent. And so we aren't seeing positives multiply in the school system like we are seeing within the household. And that, I think, right now is the biggest spread of disease, is people sitting down to dinner together, people riding in a car together, people in a household, people in those true, very confined spaces for extended periods of time, is really driving our case numbers right now. A lot of our age range is in that 20 to 60-year-old age range. And unfortunately, from our public health perspective, we really want to focus on the school age children and the elderly, because those are where we deem that greatest risk. But actually, we have since today turned over contact tracing within the school system and the notification of parents completely over to the schools, because we no longer have the bandwidth at public health to follow up with close contacts identified within the school system. And we really want to turn our focus on the individuals that are driving the pandemic and getting the message to them appropriately and timely in order to potentially curb spread.
Mr. President?
Yes, Heather.
So Ellie, I can see where folks who are listening right now might be hearing you say it's really folks 20 to 60 who are driving the spread, and then saying, so why aren't we sending all of our kids back to school? So could you clarify, is at this point, is that what we're saying, that we're not worried about schools as a driver and these mitigation strategies probably aren't needed, or is the message different than that?
I think you need to be really careful in saying anything within our community is not a risk factor, due to the incredible amount of cases within our community, within St. Croix County right now. Every decision anyone makes, whether it is in regards to school, whether it is regards to having Thanksgiving with a big group of people, all of these decisions impact the spread of COVID. And so I am not here to say that schools are not a concern. Obviously, we have meetings every Monday. We are each of us as public health individuals have a specific school liaison with whom we speak to multiple times a day. And so it is a situation where we want to be very careful about making any dramatic statements or broad statements about this situation, because it is quite uncontrolled in our community at this time.
Any other questions for Ellie? Okay, Heather.
So then to follow up on that, so has there been a modification of the recommendations that came out this summer regarding opening schools, from the CDC, from DHS around strategies that schools should try to comply with if they are able around masking, hand hygiene, cleaning protocols, social distancing? Have those been modified to reflect kind of this new information or increased information about who's driving the spread, or are those still in place as they were over the, this summer as we were planning to return to school?
Right, and I believe they are in place because they are working. Now, if you look at where the spread is, schools are masking. Schools are complying 100% with masking. Schools are taking extra effort and dedication to making sure whether students are in pods or there is plexiglass, and those efforts, those maintaining those basic messages to slow the spread of COVID are working in the schools. Now, and that's why we encourage those as public health, those basic messages to be followed everywhere to help slow the spread. Masking, social distancing, washing hands, cleaning protocols. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, anyone else? I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for the information, and thank you for your efforts in trying to get, more information on the dashboard, and, anything that we can do to help get the word out. I know people like information. It's just hasn't always been available for public health to do that. But as we're living with these numbers and dissecting them every day, it really, I think, helps people's concerns if they can understand where the spread is happening the most. So
I
thank
agree.
you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Ellie.
all. Yep, have a great night.
And just a couple things to touch on. Ellie can get off the meeting now to let her go, but we do want to reiterate, and I'll talk about a little bit more in my COVID update coming up after the presentations, is we are heading into the holiday season, and it is really going to take all of us working together on this to slow the spread. And I think that's we have a district-wide newsletter. It's going to be coming out in a couple weeks or in a week or two, where we'll address that, really hoping that people, try to limit those family gatherings and try to reiterate some of those points so that we can continue to have our kids in school. I mean, it really is an all hands on deck approach to things. And so we'll continue to have some of those challenges. So coming up next, we have the presentations from the three different proposals for equity audits. And so I don't believe our first person is on yet. Is that right, Tim? I believe they'll be getting on
Do we have time for the AP scholars?
We may have time, Dave. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dave.
Mr. President, do we have anyone here for public comment? Because rather than having them wait for an hour and a half, we could let them speak now. No?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Tim, so if you could queue up that video and get that ready to roll. So tonight we're here to honor our AP scholars. Every fall, the AP program recognizes high school students who have demonstrated outstanding college level achievement through their passing at high levels AP exams. The numbers you're going to hear tonight are outstanding. It really is impressive. Now, at Hudson High School and in all our schools, there's a lot of different ways for students to shine. A lot of different ways students can be recognized. This is one of them. It's definitely an important one. Nikki Benson and Josh Halverson, associate principals at the high school, we're going to share a quick video they put together, recognizing and appreciating the hard work these students have put in. You're going to hear several different levels of recognition. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to spend just a minute talking about it's a new level and then the highest level, just to shine some extra light on that. Again, very impressive. I've had the opportunity to work with several of these kids. They are outstanding scholars, and we're going to turn it over to this video so you can hear a little bit about their accomplishments.
Hi, I'm Nikki Benson, Associate Principal.
Josh Alverson, Associate Principal.
Welcome to the AP Scholar Recognition at tonight's board meeting.
Tonight we'll be honoring 5 different levels of AP Scholars and be digging into those definitions as we go along.
Our first group of honorees are our AP Scholars. This distinction is granted to students who receive scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. And we had 74 students earn this distinction, so we will pause at each screen so you can see their names.
Our next group is AP Scholar with honors. So this is an average score of 3.5 on all AP exams taken and adding 1 more exam, so 4 or more on these. We had 33 students that were able to attain this level.
The next level is the AP Scholar with distinction. This is granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken and scores of a 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams. And we had 65 students earn this distinction.
Next, we have our AP Capstone Diploma. The AP Capstone Diploma is granted to students who earn a 3 or higher in AP Seminar and AP Research and 4 additional AP exams of their choosing. Tonight we have 7 students.
And lastly, we have our National AP Scholars. This is granted to students in the United States who receive an average score of at least 4 on all AP exams taken and scores of 4 or higher on 8 or more of these exams. And we have 10 of our students earning this distinction.
We'd like to say congratulations to everybody. Good job, and definitely, I bet, a lot of work and a lot of hours burning the midnight oil.
We're very proud of you. Congratulations.
Bye-bye.
Again, really quick, want to talk about that National AP Scholar level. That's a 4 or higher on 8 or more AP exams. That is remarkable. That takes an incredible level of dedication, hard work, organization. It's just outstanding. So I'm going to read the names: Rachel Ball, Elizabeth Collinson, Keelan Gustafson, Bryce Hunsberger, Amanda Eichel, Mackenzie Corrent, Henry McMenamin, Anna Nelson, Maya Neuenschwander, and Alexander Weaver. Just kudos to them. Incredible work. Also on the Capstone Diploma, this is a new award available to Hudson because of the work with AP Research and AP Seminar. I was able to work directly with all these students as they went through their process of writing and conducting their research. It is every bit as high quality research as you'll see at a college level. It is amazing. You're going to see a lot of these names that were on the same list. So Keelan Gustafson, Amanda Eichel, Laura Lane, Maya Neuenschwander, Nathan Runk, Evan Schmitz, and Alexander Weaver. Amazing scholars. We're very, very proud of them. Thank you.
Yes.
So the next part of the agenda, I think Tim is letting our first presenters in. So this is the first of 3 proposals. They are going to be presenting about what I said is kind of 10 to 15 minutes talking about what they do, the proposal, and then give the board about 5 to 10 minutes to be able to ask questions about the proposal or anything that they do. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to ICS Equity. And it looks like, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you just fine.
We can
So,
hear you
perfect.
great. So perfect. And we can share screen whenever you need to. You have that ability.
Yeah, I think I can go ahead and share it. So good evening, everyone. It's good to see you, albeit virtually. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then I'll just pull up a PowerPoint. So just a little bit. So I'm Elise Fatura, Professor Emeritus from UW-Milwaukee. I taught the courses for the past 20 years on educational administration and equity and leadership. for superintendents, building principals, student service directors, special ed directors, et cetera. And then I co-founded ICS for Equity, Integrated Comprehensive Systems for Equity, with Colleen Capper, who is Professor Emeritus from UW-Madison. And she taught similar courses, parallel courses. So we each took half of the state. And then because UW-Milwaukee extends up through Green Bay in our educational administrative courses, and Madison extends up to Eau Claire. So we both had been doing that for about 20 years. Prior to that, I was a director of student services and special education and a building principal for 15 years, and then a high school teacher and a middle school teacher prior to that. If I went too far back, which my kids always say, Mom, if you don't want people to know how old you are, then stop talking about how long you've been doing something. So sometimes you have to. They have to know who you are. But prior to that, I actually taught early childhood of Montessori when I was in school. So we've had a long history. A little bit about just Colleen and I and ICS is we've been doing it for over, this is what the kids say, don't say, but almost 60, about 35 years. And it has evolved over time in working with school districts. We both decided to retire from the university. She retired last year, I retired this year, in order to actually really focus on this work 100% of the time. And so we felt like it deserved 100% of our attention. And so that's what we're doing. So I thought what I would do is talk just a little bit about the work we've done around ICS, and then the framework we use to do evaluations, and then how that leads off into professional development. But this is your time. So, you're welcome to ask questions, to stop me. I promised I wouldn't talk for too long. And I'm sure you have many things on your agenda. So I'll get going, and then, feel free just to stop me and say you have a question about something. But just a little bit about our work. As I said, we've been doing this for over 30 years. So between, teachers, administrators in the university are writing articles, and then the working with school districts has literally been since 1983. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. We look at it as an educator. We also look at it from the understanding, and I believe the compassion of knowing what it's like to be in the field. And that's how we taught our courses at the university, and it's how we do this work. And so we think it's really important that we understand from that perspective, because it is a different perspective. And we've taken most of our work and put it onto icsequity.org, which is a digital book or books. It's multiple books. So right now we have a digital book for schools to work through a process for district level. We're just adding the school boards and community. And then DPI and other states, ODE, which is in Ohio Department of Ed, have asked us to do state level books for them. So we will be adding those. But our most recent work has been on ICS Equity. So it does say 2015 on there, but it's always recent. So it's 2020. We made it digital so we could go in and change things. But I just wanted to talk about what we do and why. And then, as I said, I'll go into the equity evaluation or audit. But our work it's a framework. We don't believe in piecemeal. And the reason it's a framework is because in order to create lasting, sustainable change, you have to look at the entire system. And so often I would think as an administrator, and as I taught the courses, that there was always like 15 plates spinning and they were all multidimensional, and that we have to be able to orchestrate those in a really healthy, pragmatic, wise way with equity at its core. And it's not easy, but it can be made a process, and it can be done in a very systematic way. So we don't see our work as an initiative or a specific program or a workshop. We don't, I have to be honest, we just don't believe that if someone wants an initiative or a quick fix that it's not going to resolve the problems. So when we have achievement gaps and when we have authentic problems, we have to approach those in an authentic, pragmatic way. And so that's how we look at it. The other part of this is, when we pay attention to achievement gaps, when we pay attention to inequities within our schools, we actually lift the learning of all kids. And so by race, disability, language, social class, religion, gender, sexual gender identity, and all their intersections, we have a range of kids with different identities. And the most important part of this is it's just not a zero-sum game. So we see equity completely attached and commensurate with high quality teaching and learning. That's what we look at. Is everything in the system working in a way that it lifts everyone up, that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not about focusing on these kids over those kids. It's about making sure the system in a really healthy way. So that's some of the work. It's research-based. As I said, we've been doing it for a very long time. And then I thought I would just talk just a little bit about the evaluation. And this is how we see system change. We know that oppression and marginalization are historical, structural, cultural, and systemic. We know that. And so that requires equity systems change. It's why people ask for an equity audit, that it's not one piece of the system or this piece of the system, that it has to be systemic. So our framework is set up into 4 cornerstones, all engaged in developing community. And the first cornerstone is really the focus on equity and what the system looks like, just really looking at the language in the system, how people see families and kids within the system. Do we actually use curriculum and asset-based language in a healthy, wise way? Do we know what the quality as far as research looks like? Do we have very specific steps to address and obtain our vision? So when I look at your vision talked a lot about, maximizing talents and the contribution of all staff. Is the system aligned in a way for all staff to contribute? Can they share their expertise? Can they make sure they synthesize instruction for all learners so we don't fragment instruction for learners? So we would look at all these pieces. Often what happens is we take kind of this nosedive into cornerstone 3, transforming teaching and learning at the classroom level, without really looking at culturally, how are we situated? How are we aligned as far as staff and students? Are teachers able to share their knowledge? And then how does it play out in the classroom? And how does our policy and funding support our whole system? So when we look at doing an evaluation or an equity audit, we really look through all 4 cornerstones in order to do the analysis. And so I'll just spend just a little time talking about that. And then my assumption is you might have questions, and I'm happy to go deeper in any of this. So an external equity evaluation, we usually start, and we see it more as a partnership. It's collaborative. It is participatory. So we use focus groups from each school that represent the range of teachers, counselors, school psychologists. And within those focus groups, we ask questions of like 3 or 4 open-ended questions that basically say, first of all, how is your school arranged? But secondly, what do you think is going really well for kids and staff? And then where do you think the hiccups are? And then we ask further questions on where do you think the hiccups are? What are the challenges in the system about meeting the needs of each and every learner? Do we have hiccups with, are all kids learning at the rate they should be learning? What does it mean for kids who are linguistically diverse? What does it mean for kids experiencing poverty? Can we lift that bar for all learners? So that's the focus groups of each school. And we often do one set and then follow up with any other individual interviews, but then we set up specific individual interviews with administrators, because we typically ask that like the principal not participate in the focus group of the school, so teachers can talk freely. And then we meet with the principal individually, school board members, et cetera, have district office are all individual interviews. And then, you know, if it makes sense for your district to do focus groups of community members, and we may ask to do focus groups of students as well, especially, you know, middle and high, and kind of asking what works well for you here, what meets your needs, and where are the hiccups, and just hearing from students as well, so that it's a very comprehensive qualitative part of the evaluation. We then look at the data, so really just looking at the data, and we look at data a little differently. So equity audit data we do by student groups, and then within student groups we do by achievement, but we look at proportional representation as the key piece. So an example of that might be the percentage of kids that are identified for gifted that are also experiencing poverty. And is that equivalent? Is that less than the kids that are experiencing poverty in the district, or more than? So if you're 15, 20% poverty, where does that fall? So really looking at the proportional representation of kids and the services they're getting. Do we over-identify kids with disabilities who are experiencing poverty? Do we over-identify kids with disabilities who are linguistically diverse? So what does that look like? So not just the achievement data, but the proportional representation data, which is what the feds look at and the state looks at when we look at disproportionality. And they often, you know, the state often looks at disproportionality around disability only. We look at disproportionality around all groups of students. So then we take that information, the equity audit, the quantitative part of it, as well as the qualitative part of it, the focus groups. And depending on where we are, if we can be on site, we would also do observations. And depending on how the schools are set up right now. And then we would take the information, complete an analysis, and then we would use this framework to complete the analysis of really thinking about the focus on equity, how staff are aligned, transforming teaching and learning, and then policy and funding. So part of the other information that we would ask for is we would ask for access to policy and procedures, and then any kind of funding as far as just looking at how dollars are spent. Are they supporting the highest quality teaching and learning and reinforcing that? So then we would do the analysis, complete the report, and then do a final submission to the leadership team, and then share it out or do a debrief with the school board with the leadership team. We've often done public forums as well, sharing out the information. But most importantly, it is a set of recommendations. And the recommendations are about really looking at how to take something like the puzzle pieces. The recommendations are how do we help from an outside perspective pull the system together, stand on what's going really well, and take those puzzle pieces and pull together to advance improvement for everyone, and leverage it from the district strategic plan. So just a little detail about what's in those cornerstones. And often, based on the recommendations, we would look at offering professional development in the following areas. So that would be up to you if you were interested in that. But looking at really, and the professional development, the way we do it is about training a leadership team from each building so that the leadership team can advance the work forward. We think the most important thing is to build the capacity of synergy and share that out. And so our colleagues listen to each other. And so when we build that expertise within a small group and they share it out, it has worked really, really well. So just within the cornerstones, you'll see that focus on equity includes some understanding of how we set up current educational services. Do we have deficit or asset-based thinking? Where do we sit with our own identity development? are we really looking at the best research around really thinking about high quality teaching and learning for all kids? Do we have core principles that we follow? And then how does our equity audit drive that change? Again, the structures, and then what goes on in a classroom. So how does it all work together and tie together as far as teachers sharing knowledge and being able to proactively support all kids? And then policies and procedures. So we typically would follow that primarily because we've built it over 35 years and we've learned by mistakes, by missing pieces, by analysis, by our own experience that it's hard to sustain change when we miss pieces of the puzzle, in the analysis in order to get to where we want to go. So and this is just a little bit about the professional development of how we typically do it. So I thought I would stop there and just see where you are. So it's about 17 minutes. And then I'm happy to answer questions or go into any part of it in more detail.
No, that's great, Elise. I'll open up board members. I think Sue, you had a question.
I always have a question.
Yeah.
Dr. Frattura, I like that last name of yours, and I had a frattura in Italy when I was there once. But anyway, I have a question about, well, I should say that one of my kind of things I'm anxious about in doing an equity audit is really being able to hear honest, authentic, free, dig deep responses from the various groups that you would be doing the, not the interviews, the groups, the group engagements. And so with the open-end questions, I'm sure your staff's very skilled, but how do you get people to really not just paint a lovely picture of our school district, but really come up with some honest, free and open responses?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have to say, I love doing focus groups, but some of it is about, first of all, we have a very short time. And if the focus groups are virtual, there's a bridge because we also need to get people to trust us, to want to talk to us, right? But we can also tell by language and, if they're holding back. So, we listen to them very clearly and words matter. And so people say, they talk in the way that they think, right? And so language tells us more than anything, even if they don't know they're telling us it, right? So how the services are set up, how they explain how they're set up. Are we actually blaming kids and families, or do we hold the system responsible for student success, right? That's all done in language. So we listen very closely to what people say, how they say it, and then we can dig in deeper, just as far as questions. But we also look for themes, right? So if we're hearing people talk the same way, we have a really strong idea of how things are playing out. So that's, the open-ended questions, are intentional, not to lead, right? We don't want to lead in. But at this, and people bring up, teachers will bring up exactly what's important to them. But that doesn't mean, so if they bring up something that's terribly important, but it doesn't lift student achievement, that also tells us something. So if it's terribly important to them, but we know based on research, it doesn't lift student achievement, well, that's a hiccup right there, right? The other thing we know is I always give out my email and ask people to call or set up, and I can tell certain people have more to say than they're saying. And so we would set up individual interviews with them, and we would follow up, because there is a part, we're very specific of how those focus groups are set up, because sometimes people won't talk in front of other people, right? So we try really hard. It's why we have the principals as an individual interview, not that there's not healthy relationships. It's just that there's a differential in power, right? There's also a differential in power between special ed teachers and general ed teachers sometimes, between ELL. And so we'll talk about, if you're interested in doing this eval, exactly what the makeup of groups should be, and pay attention to that. But we'll ask questions to figure out that makeup, because you'll know more than we know, right? The district is going to know more. So all I can say is we're practiced at it. I think I've done over 100 outside evaluations, from Seattle Public Schools to San Francisco Public to Boston to small school districts like New Holstein, right? So from Illinois suburbs, et cetera. And so we've done these evaluations often, and we listen intently.
All right, we have a couple of board members that have questions. With the slide that you have up there, for where it says Cornerstone 1 focused on equity, and I see step 6 talks about the equity audit, and you've got year 1. So from the time of your engagement through the date that you would be meeting with the board to debrief and make recommendations, how long do you see that time frame being?
Well, that's your timeline. So, so the timeline that's on these slides is for professional development. So often just looking at, so what I did was just take it from the evaluation of talking about the evaluation to, if based on the evaluation and recommendations, what would professional development look like? And it's not us doing this professional development. It would be your district leadership teams and school leadership teams carrying the work forward. We just think it has to be done in an authentic, pragmatic way. So we just put the years up there for that.
I got you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. So the outside evaluation, we would move as fast or as slow as you wanted to, but it usually takes, at least 2 months, depending on the time of year.
Okay. And then my follow-up question to that was that about how many of these equity audits would you do in an academic year?
So we try really hard not to do any more than 2. You mean across all districts?
Yeah, well, I thought that, like you and your cohort, I just didn't know, you work together as a team, I understand. And so how many do you take on in an academic year like 2021?
Oh, okay. So at any given time, we never do more than 1. I can say that. So we do about 8 a year, but we split up who does them. And I typically don't do more than 2 or 3 a year. Because I'm located in Wisconsin, Colleen is located in Alabama. I would be doing this one, which is why I said I would share out with the board, because I would be the primary contact, and then probably do it with Colleen or another coach as ours. But we actually try to keep it reasonable for all of us so that we don't exceed about 6 to 8. The company does, obviously many more than that. But it's important for us not to do more than 1 or 2 at a time. So we focus on the district specifically.
Thank you. And Bruce had his hand up first, and then Heather.
Hi, thanks for your time, Elise. I appreciate it. So just a couple of quick questions. So first of all, in Cornerstone 2, I presume you're working with, even teachers like in our 4K program, all the way up. So, really embedding the practice right as kids are coming into the district. I presume, there's a lot of work that's done throughout that 4K through 12 grouping. Just confirm that.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously developmentally appropriate, right? Applied to the grade level appropriately. So high schools are more complicated. They just are, right?
Yep.
At the same time, 4 is complicated in its own respect. Kids are coming in, it's their first experience. What does it mean with special ed and early childhood, 3 to 5? So all of that matters, right? It all matters.
Yeah, thank you. I assumed as much. I just wanted to confirm.
Yes.
So secondly, and I apologize if I missed this, but just curious. I see the staff and the students. We have a pretty active community in the Hudson here, and just kind of curious how the assessment weaves in the community and the you know, kind of the current makeup of the community, but also engagement within the community.
Yeah. So the cornerstones, so if you see the cornerstones, the arrows around it are engage and develop community. That is all about the community. We would do focus groups with the community. It would be up to the district of how to arrange those so we have clear representation of the community and everyone has voice, right? So we would definitely pay attention to that and connect it all together. And we're excited. I'm excited that you asked that question because we think it's imperative. So thank you.
Yep.
Yep, we have
Thank you.
4 minutes left. Heather and then Rob has a question.
You've talked about the achievement gap, which obviously is something that we are concerned about. Reflecting though on our board work session 2 weeks ago, we had about 15 probably folks come speak to us, including students. And I think they were talking not so much about the achievement gap, but maybe what we could call the experience gap. So they were talking about the way that students who are not majority students kind of go through their school years experiencing those years as others, about microaggressions, but also parents who were talking about their students experience gaps, students who are majority students, but these parents are saying, I want my kid to have an academic experience that presents a more diverse and global perspective throughout the curriculum. How does the audit process get at some of those concerns that are maybe beyond the traditional concerns around achievement gaps?
Right. So actually the audit is all about all of those concerns. So when people are talking about microaggressions, they're talking about deficit-based thinking. So anytime I say something that lifts me up and pushes someone else down, it's a microaggression, right? And so all of that will be taken into consideration. When you talk about the experience gap, or it's usually defined often as the access gap, right? That certain populations of students, because of the history, so it goes back to this history that educational systems have. We have a 250-year-old history of how we got to where we are that actually creates that access gap. So it's not the fault of teachers. It's certainly not the fault of students and families. It's not the fault of anybody, but we have a long-standing history that's led us to structure and align staff. So we would pay attention to those access gaps all the way through this, but especially looking at how staff are aligned, because how staff are aligned defines exactly what access all students have across all student groups.
Thank you. And then Rob, your question?
Two hopefully really, really quick questions for Nick and then a follow-up with Eloise. Nick, what % of our student population is minority, if you will, classified as minority? And then likewise with our teachers and staff.
We're running about 11 to 13% minority, give or take, but our teachers and staff, I don't have an exact answer on that.
Is it less than that or on par?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Eloise, it sounds like you've done a lot of really great work with urban areas. You mentioned New Holstein, which appears to be a fairly small school district. We have 5,600 kids. We have hundreds of teachers and staff. From an engagement, whether it's with the community, students, teachers, how do you make sure that you're collecting the voices of our target audience, but also helping the overall community?
Well, it's important to know, I listed the largest to some of the smallest, but then everywhere in between. So you should know that the majority of school districts that we've done this work with hover around 4,500 students. So you're at about 5,500, I think 56, but hover around that to 10,000. So most of our evaluations are there. But the reason for the focus groups are voice. So we'll do as many focus groups as we need. And that's so not just to get the themes until we hit satiation. And what I mean by that is there's a part where we're holding focus groups and we're not learning anything new. We are not learning. And so we need 2, 3, 4, 5 focus groups where we have hit satiation. We're not learning anything, which means I think we've heard the voices, right? So it'll be important though that we would look at your demographics, which I'm reasonably familiar with what I can receive offline or online, but look at your demographics, look at the community demographics, and make sure that all our focus groups represent all the people.
Thank you. With that, we'll have to end it. We have our next interview coming up, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take good care.
Good evening. Can you, Katie and Dr. Williams, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine.
Oh,
Yes.
Great, great. So we have the board ready to go, and I kind of given you guys kind of heads up. It's kind of a 10 to 15 minute opportunity to kind of talk about your work and what you do, and then an opportunity for then, about the board to be able to ask some questions and kind of dig in a little bit deeper. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate the chance to be with you and talk a little bit about our capabilities and also some of the ideas that have been presented in the proposal that we worked up. My name is Damon Williams. I serve as Chief Catalyst for the Center for Strategic Diversity Leadership and also the National Inclusive Excellence Leadership Academy. I've had a chance to work with more than 1,000 organizations of all types of sizes, complexities, and locations all around the world. I have a continuing appointment at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I serve as Senior Scholar and Innovation Fellow. And I was the inaugural Associate Vice Chancellor, Vice Provost at UW-Madison, leading all their K through 16 activities across the state of Wisconsin, and also served as Senior Vice President and Chief Education Officer for all Boys and Girls Clubs around the world, developing youth development curriculums, K through 12 school district partnerships that serve millions of children. I'm an author. The work that we do is driven by research, evidence-based scholarship that's been validated at the highest levels. I'm the author of the best-selling Strategic Diversity Leadership, the first book on chief diversity officers. We recently authored a COVID-19 DEI crisis action strategy guide that's been downloaded thousands of times. And since the pandemic has hit, we've had a chance to address more than 20,000 persons through keynote addresses and various different sessions that we've led on our platforms and also others. Our work and our approach and philosophy that we would bring to your school district is informed by a new study that we're in the midst of looking at DEI challenges and strategy at elite K through 12 institutions. In particular, we have 25 elite schools that we are tracking, understanding what's going on at their institutions. We've gathered more than 4,000 pieces of racialized and other DEI types of stories and insights that have garnered over 1.1 million likes. Those institutions are listed here, some of them across the country. They are private independent schools, but given your context in Hudson, we think that some of the research we're doing in that context could be very relevant to the work we would be tasked to do in your context. We have a very diverse group of individuals that work with us, diverse not only in terms of identity characteristics you can see of race, ethnicity, and gender, but also most critically diverse in terms of skill sets, knowledge, background, and ability that we bring to this work. A couple further points here. The team really brings years and years of experience in the side of this work, more than 100 years of experience engaging this stuff in our core leadership team. And one of the things I think is a part of our unique value proposition is we bring a number of PhD level researchers, educators, curriculum specialists, trainers to the work that we do. So your project, which for example, I believe would have a strong focus on climate and school culture, would also have a strong focus on curriculum and instruction. We have tenured professors that work with us on a regular basis and will be involved in your project. In addition to that, while I was at Madison, I founded and led one of the nation's real outstanding, culturally relevant curriculum and instruction institutes called Hip Hop in the Heartland, which was really about understanding today's generation of young people and really about creating culturally relevant approaches inside of that space. while I was at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, I also had a chance to preside over the development of 5 federally acknowledged What Works Clearinghouse best practice K through 12 curricular interventions in the STEM preparedness area, also in the area of leadership development, and those various different initiatives that we led were Common Core aligned. So bring a lot of experience personally, but also our team to understanding these issues at various different levels. And we just have an incredible network of folks that work with us through our center. Our work is not about speaking truth to power. Our work is about hope and guidance. And if there's anything I think that the last several months have shown us, and even the most recent days of the elections have shown us, is that we all need some more hope and some guidance here, because we really have to continue to create connectivity and continue to pull ourselves together as a nation. And for me, there's no more important of an opportunity for us to do that than having a chance to work at the K through 12 level around these various issues. We talk about helping institutions of all kinds to navigate this perfect storm of dynamics that is really elevating issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion broadly defined. The resurgence of activism that we've seen, the rise of the millennial and centennial, or some would say Generation Z generations, which are the most diverse that we've ever seen. Technology and social media, meaning that the smallest misstep, the smallest comment can become a flashpoint for a school district, for a Fortune 100 company, for a major university. And recently, what's happened in the past and what is now in front of us in terms of a new recession, which is going to further exacerbate societal and educational inequities. And then this glowing climate of hate that we've seen in our country in recent years. Our job, as we view it, is the opportunity to help organizations to navigate all of these dynamics moving forward. We bring deep understanding of this generation of young people. I've worked with young people all over this country, indeed all over the world, around these critical issues of various different racial, ethnic, geographic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. And we leverage and bring that experience to Hudson schools. As we think about your project, for us, there were a couple of key points that we thought would be important to build into a methodology. One is we really wanted to help you to have an understanding of issues of climate and culture by taking a really deep dive across your various schools inside the district through a combination of dialogue and community building listening sessions, which are focus group-like, but a bit different, open-ended surveys, giving individuals a chance to free write and share their stories, share their insights confidentially and anonymously, and also interviews with key stakeholders to really generate this understanding. A second kind of major area of methodology we thought would be appropriate would be to engage in a level of what we refer to as culturally relevant review of disciplinary data, achievement data, human resources data, looking for patterns of inequity, looking for patterns that suggest areas where we may want to really focus into in terms of opportunities to improve. And then the third thing was really to take a look at curriculum and to look at how issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are positioned in the implicit and explicit curriculums of the Hudson School District, knowing that we're talking about a wide span from early learners through to middle schoolers, all the way into high schoolers. We at Boys and Girls Clubs of America talk about the littles, the tweens, and the teens. And so wanting to understand those issues and how they manifest curricularly. And then lastly, for us, we are researchers, we're scholars, but the research and the scholarship that we want to do in the service of the schools is really to establish a foundation to spark action. And so you'll notice that one of the things we built into our proposal was a insights to action set of recommendations in terms of a strategic DEI leadership institute, some forums, board presentation to really spark insights to action and change energy. Too often, good research, good assessment work is done, and it doesn't translate into meaningful action steps and understandings. For us, that is antithetical to our principles, values, and purpose, which is to really use research, evidence-based insights to create good, solid strategy so institutions and leaders can take steps forward and create a more diverse, inclusive environment, and importantly, to prepare the next generation for leadership in our country. I'll end with this final statement before I open it up for questions and comments. For us, it's really about creating a continuum. We could spend most of our time, actually we could spend all of our time working at the higher education level and the corporate level, but we've been very intentional about wanting to get involved at the K through 12 level with these issues. I think that the Hudson School District is ahead of the curve as an environment that has young people in spaces where they could benefit from elevating these conversations. Many school districts are opening these conversations. Many independent schools are opening these conversations, and we'd love to be a partner as you begin and hopefully accelerate on that journey over the next several years. So with that said, it's some very quick moving opening statements. I will stop and turn it back to you for questions, comments, thoughts, and reaction.
Okay, Rob.
Good evening, Damon.
Hello.
So with regards to the Boys and Girls Club, it sounds like you've had just a bunch of success there. Looking through your proposal, you talk about racial healing. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that you had with the Boys and Girls Clubs as it relates to the LGBTQ plus community?
Sure, absolutely. So when I arrived at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, many people have a lot of thoughts about the organization, but one of the things they don't understand is, number one, Boys and Girls Clubs of America is one of the most racially, ethnically, and diverse institutions in the country serving young people. About 40% of all Boys and Girls Clubs of America youth are white, and about 58+% are historically underrepresented minorities. They're also the largest population serving military youth in the world. And inside of that work, candidly, questions of LGBTQIA youth was not on the radar at all. And in fact, it's an organization that historically had been is very conservative, and in certain communities was very conservative. And that identity was not really elevated and discussed nationally at all. And in local clubs, it was happening sporadically. One of the things that I did upon arrival is, number one, I created a national center of excellence in the area of health, wellness, and gender identity development. That center had as one of its priorities sexual orientation, gender identity expression. So we created a strategic capability at the national level. From there, we established a national task force to begin working on these issues. One of the first things that we did was create a set of data collection activities to help us to start understanding how many young people were either A, identifying as a member of the LGBTQIA community, or two, questioning their identity, or three, identifying themselves as gender nonconforming. From that understanding, we started to get a sense that perhaps as many as 40% of the young people we were serving were either a member of that community or were somehow fluidly finding their pathway and foothold in that community. That was a really powerful insight for us. From there, we developed a national toolkit to help local clubs to be able to work with and engage with those young people. We also began to establish a series of trainings, and we implemented those trainings at scale across the country, trying to help local leaders to level up in working with these young people, whether they were on a military base in Germany, whether they were in a poor rural community in Appalachia, whether they were in an elite suburban community in Cincinnati, Ohio, or somewhere else that we serve young people. So we did a lot of great work there. One of the things I'm probably most proud of is the work that we did in the LGBTQIA space.
All right. Other board members? Heather?
Thanks so much for being with us this evening. Can you talk a little bit maybe about experience you've had working in communities like Hudson, where, on one hand, we have a really vocal, energetic group of folks who are encouraging and pushing us to do this work, really encouraging us to even go beyond the achievement gap and really look at, the experience that students who are not majority students have in our buildings, in our system, kind of as other, if you will, parents whose kids are majority students, if you will, but they want their kids to have a more diverse, a more global experience in school. And at the same time, because we have about 90% majority community, we also have plenty of community members who are kind of scratching their heads and saying, I don't even understand, why are we talking about this and why would we consider spending money on it? So can you talk a little bit about, I assume part of the process and the work that you do with us is about how to engage the community in a way that hopefully gets more folks kind of on board with the idea that this is the right work to do and that it's relevant. But if you've had experience in a community like that, it would be helpful to hear how you approach that and how you would approach it here.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, one of the things that we know is that across the board, individuals in lots of different spaces around these issues, right? And to your point, some are all in, we got to do this now, and how do we do it better? Others are asking the question, why is this even relevant? Are we kowtowing to, kind of these broader politicized forces? And then there's other people in the middle. And, candidly, it's like that everywhere. So whether we're working with a company, whether we're working with a university, whether we're working with a K through 12 institution or a K through 12 serving institution, I've found that there's an incredible level of similarity. And for us, this culture and moving cultures, they're defined by tradition. They're defined by privilege. They're defined at times by homogeneity, by risk aversion, what the noted author Wabin D'Angelo refers to as a white fragility. A lack of cultural competence, and largely, more than anything, we found that they're defined by a fear of the unknown, a fear of engagement. And so for us, one of the things we really believe in is the importance of getting very clear on our messaging framework around what we're doing and why. I think that why is important to understand. For us, this is about how we prepare all of our students for a world that's diverse, global, and interconnected. It's also about being responsive to the strategic disunity we've seen in our country. Based on research that we're tapping into, between 15 and 26 million persons participated in the Black Lives Matter social demonstrations, making it the largest social demonstration movement in the history of this country and maybe in the history of the world, definitely the recorded world. And so inside of that, those are forces that clearly illustrate this elevation, but how do we do it in a way that brings people on a journey? One of the things that we proposed tactically in your plan to help with that, because we knew that there would be persons all across the board here. And that last cell here is around board, parent, alumni engagement. One of the things that we proposed for you was to host some forums. In particular, I think it was 2 forums, one at the beginning, one at the end. Those forums, and obviously would be virtual, would allow for folks to learn about the project, meet us, hear about where this is going, and hopefully we can use that as a platform to make meaning. I think one of the strategic benefits that you get when you work with us is that we can do big stadium and we can also do small club performances in terms of presenting information. And so we have an ability to reach hearts and minds and create connection with the message, with the why, with where we're going, to show empathy around these things. And we really try to bring those things together in every single engagement that we do, knowing that there's a lot of complexity. We're working with very similar communities right now. I can't name some of my clients I'm working with right now, but some of the most elite independent schools in the country, which bring those exact same dynamics to the fore. The only difference is at those institutions, they're paying $50,000, $45,000 a year for their young people to go into this area. And we are on the journey working with some of them right now at this very point.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, you mentioned that you work with companies and universities. What percentage of your clientele are K through 12 public school districts?
That's a great question. I don't have a percent right now, but I will tell you that I've got 5 K through 12 institutions we're working with at different levels of complexity. Some of those are one-time training efforts. One of them is a year-long partnership effort. We don't take on too many year-long partnership efforts or 6-month partnership efforts at a time because we can only manage so many of them in our portfolio. But we do have 5 active projects right now in portfolio where we have recently done a all-school training for faculty and leadership around allyship. We're forging forward with a new climate and culture study of another institution. We're working with the board of another institution around these issues and how they should be getting their hands engaged with it. And then another institution has a project which is more comprehensive in nature. And in that, we're actually doing research. We're doing the policy and curriculum review, and we also are doing training and capacity building. So multiple different levels. So, one thing I will offer is this. Most college and universities around the country use my work, and I've visited most of them. There's very few that you can name that I haven't had a chance to touch at some point. This work for us in the K through 12 space, we don't have as deep of a roster there that we work with, but the folks that we have worked with will speak very highly to us, to our abilities, and I think that as we continue forward, it'll be distinguishing. The final point I'll offer with respect to this is I stepped away from what I was doing in higher education to go serve America's youth at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, because I wanted to get more fundamentally invested and involved with K through 12 education, youth development, character-based issues, curricular issues. That movement into that space was for 4+ years. When I stepped down from my national appointment in that role, I full-time launched my center. That's only been 3 years ago. And so we're still building infrastructure and capability, but we feel very good about the work that we've done, and hopefully we'll have a chance to do some of that good work with you.
Then my other question, you outline your fees and your proposal at page 21, starts at page 21, and your estimate for the phase 1, as you call it, being $155,000. What time period are we talking about for you to accomplish those things that are phase 1A, 1B, 1C?
Yes, I believe that we've outlined that as a 6-month project engagement. So roughly a January through June engagement period, whereby we would execute the various aspects of the methodology. And indeed, if we were to reach an alignment that you wanted to work with us and we wanted to work with you, we got to a deal, I could see, it starting perhaps even before January, at least in the planning phase. But obviously, we got a lot of road to cover to get to that point. But about 6 months is what we're thinking. And
then you have for phase 2, general timeline to be determined, you have on there, but you include some virtual training sessions and some videos. And integrated video links into our district. So is that something, I see a 24-month password protected access. Does Fit 75,000 cover that entire 2-year time period, or is that something that, is utilized more in the first year, and how long does it generally take?
Sure, great question. So, it's difficult to forecast projections, particularly in the age of Corona, right? But what we were thinking is, if we were so fortunate to forge this relationship, we would come out of phase 1 and, really be looking to build capability, right? So strengthen capability with faculty, strengthen capability with leadership around these issues, perhaps working with other constituents as well. What we framed out was kind of our standard approach and package. We really want to identify 5 kind of key learning experiences that you thought were really, really important. And then we would execute those learning experiences 3 times live. So we could control size and be able to offer some intimate learning experiences for faculty in particular, who I'd imagine would be very invested here. And so actually in that package, as we outlined, it was 5 unique trainings. Each of them offered 3 different times live, so 15. And then from the 5, we would take those 5 and we would then develop self-directed learning modules, which would allow for someone to go back to a training if they had already done it, or if they hadn't done the live, they could do it asynchronously at their own discretion, or if it was somebody that was new, hired into the district, and you wanted to create a policy that said that, you know, every new faculty member, you know, within their first X number of months must do you know, X numbers of training, you would have that capability. In the world we live in now, everything's about content and ownership of content. And what we've been moving forward with is a standard 24-month license. And so that license would allow for you to forge forward for the 24 months. And at the end of the 24 months, we would have another conversation if you wanted to relicense that intellectual property, or if you said, hey, we'd like to, you know, build some new stuff, or you know, Damon, we don't want to continue to license that content. And those are all obviously points of discussion and negotiation moving forward. You all asked great questions.
Any other questions? All right, I don't see any. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your proposal.
Thank you.
Before
you
we
very
go,
much.
one final thing. It is so strange. I can't tell who's talking because you all have your masks on. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm trying to identify who took their mute off, and I totally could not do it. Thank you all for your great preparation and questions and keeping us in a tight meeting. It's a late time for us on the East Coast. God bless and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Right,
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Seema, can you hear us okay?
I just logged in, so
Oh.
I think we're good. Can you hear me?
Perfect. So, you know, as I explained to the board and as we talked on the phone, so it'd be, you know, about 10, 15 minutes. You kind of give the background and your work and what you do with everything, and then leave an opportunity for the board to be able to ask some questions and kind of go that way and kind of dig deeper. So I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Kind of fun to just like jump in and there's all these people and I have to like present versus like walking into a room. So I miss it. But I would just love to know everybody's name real quick. I know it's part of my 10, 15 minutes, but quick name, voice.
Go ahead, Sue, you start.
Why don't you also give kind of your position so she knows exactly kind of who she's talking
Oh,
about?
I'm Sue. I'm a board member, visual arts. Oh gosh, did you hear that? School board.
I love it.
I'm Bob, school board member.
Hi, Heather,
Hi.
school board member.
Nick, superintendent.
Hi, Jamie Johnson, school board.
Carrie Whitaker, school board.
Rob Brown, school board.
Tracy
Andrea
Habish.
Welker.
Oops, go ahead. Go ahead, Andrea.
Andrea Welker, HR director.
Go ahead, Erin.
Erin Chilkin, student services.
Tracy Habishaw Lean, community relations.
That's everybody in the room.
That's everyone. Awesome. Well, thank you. It's good to hear your voices. My name is Seema Pothani, and I am here on behalf of Equity Literacy Institute. My colleague Paul Gorski is the one that heads up Equity Literacy Institute, and he's got an amazing team of people who work with him because he can't do it all. And so I'm super excited to present you our information. And my understanding is that you have our proposals and you've looked at it. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time, but I'm going to just go through a little bit. I'm going to start screen sharing and just show you a little bit about who we are and kind of our approach, and then obviously go into questions. So let's see if this all works, this tech. I always do a deep breath. I've got 2 kids at home who are also online right now. So I'm like, I need it for like 2 minutes. Let me get this.
So we can see your screen. It's just it was just the Zoom tab, but we could see your screen.
Perfect. Yeah, you can see my mess of work. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure I can optimize for a video clip because I do have one that I want to share. And yes, this is my mess of work. Here we go. Okay, so Equity Literacy Institute. My name is Seema Pothani. My email address is up there, but Nick obviously has it too, so you don't need to copy that down. I did love your be patient, be kind, keep others in mind. Like I looked that up on your website and was like, this is awesome. So very catchy. What is your why? I always start with why do we do the work that we do? I know that you heard probably from 2 other amazing presenters today, and hopefully you were able to get insight. This is a little bit about my why, Equity Literacy's why. For us, it's all about the youth. It's impacting the youth experience. And we've found that when our youth are having an amazing time and they feel included and valued and they're thriving, then our staff feel like this huge relief is off of their shoulders and families are more involved, parents, caregivers. And so for us, it starts with that youth and the youth voice. And so I do have a quick video that I want to show you just because I do think it's important to get that youth voice in the room at any time that we do our work. It kind of grounds me and grounds us. This is a friend of mine. Her name is Valen. She is a sophomore at the Boston University. And she was asked by her school district, she was a theater arts major. And after she left, she was asked by her school district to do a message, to record a message for their staff on their big like opening day kickoff. And this is the message that she did. And her words just really are profound to me. It's about 3 minutes long, but I do think it's a powerful message and it's our why. So bear with me while we listen to Valen.
In a world so full of color, why would I choose to be colorblind? With all the blue in the sky and the green in my eyes and the orange of a monarch butterfly, why would I choose to be colorblind? See, so many teachers have said to me in an effort to promote inclusivity, I don't see color. An otherwise harmless statement, but when it comes to race, it's not quite the same as you think. What you mean is that you love all of your students equally. All the students you have the capacity to serve, but in actuality, your students are not all treated equally. And they're also different colors. The last thing you want to do when it comes to race is erase the things that make us unique, erase a piece of what we see staring back at us. It's not about not seeing color. It's not about negating it. It's about celebrating it and raising the voices of Black authors, Black activists, Black leaders, Black heritage, Black existence, but resisting the single narrative. Resisting the story that Africa is one big territory with nothing but huts and famine. It's examining our own biases, our own prejudices, and accepting that you are not immune to making mistakes. So make them. Then take them as an opportunity to learn, because isn't that what we're here to do? Isn't that the spirit we're fostering? It's exhausting being young and Black in the country we're living in. Your students are exhausted, but not giving in. When it's been 400 years, you learn to cope. So I hope you take their hands and make an effort to understand and see color. Then read about it. Go to BSU meetings, be about it, meaning roll up your sleeves and apply what you're learning. Don't rely on the one Black student in your class to carry their entire community on their backs. Don't ask them to preach, but allow them to speak their truth if they so choose, and use their name. Even if it's hard to pronounce, announce your allyship. Wave it like a flag across the room. You have the opportunity to make your space a safe one. So take it and name racism when you see it. It's not teasing, it's feeding the beast of white supremacy. So seize the moment to dismantle the hate and educate. It's what you do best. Address the uncomfortable, lean into what is difficult to talk about, because it all starts with conversations, hard ones. We must talk about redlining, talk about healthcare inequalities, talk about employment disparities, talk about hair and how all hair types are professional. Racism is not conceptual, it is real and it is perpetual. It is not political, but it is critical that you use your audience to promote tolerance. Talk about it. Read about it and be about it. See color, then use it to paint a better future for your students.
So I do love her deep breath at the end. And I told Valen any chance I get to put her in front of a group of educators, I would do so. So thank you for listening. And I think a lot of her messages ring true with the work that we do at Equity Literacy Institute. Our passion and purpose is rooted in changing the trajectories for our youth. My why, my personal why, is just that understanding of education and the power of it. I do have a picture up here of a picture I took last summer, and it's in Hudson. And Hudson actually has a super special place in my heart. It's where I always went as a little kid. And I'm in Minneapolis, and I do get emotional because I love your city. And so to get this request come across ELI, I was like, yes, like we totally have to work with Hudson schools, because I know as a person of color, I have always felt welcome. And granted, like I've only been in certain parts of Hudson, but I do want to make sure that regardless of how your students and families show up in their schools, that they feel welcome and they feel like they can be their authentic self. So that's why we do the work that we do. So a little bit about us and what it is that we do in our philosophy. So it's this comprehensive approach. This is all the information that you have in your handbook, so I'm not showing it in our proposal, so it's not anything new. But I think like the big thing for us is that commitment to really understanding individual and institutional understandings of how equity and inequity operate in organizations. I do talk a lot about racial inequity, just because I know it's the one that people are probably the most uncomfortable talking about, and it's my lived experience. But by no means do we only focus on that. We do understand that there is gender inequity, socioeconomic equity, sexual identity, sexual orientation, all of that comprises a student's experience. So we do look at all of those components and dig deep into them. So we really, and so here again, we talk about ability, disability, language, religion, immigration status, whatever identity that students bring into the school setting. And so what we do really is to empower people, even just through our audits and the way that we do our work, is to really recognize the subtlest forms of bias and inequity, so that when we're done with our work and we leave, that still continues, that people feel equipped, they feel like they have the tools and that they are ready to do that on their own. So just a couple things here. When we talk about equity literacy, we talk about the ability to recognize subtle biases. And so that's what we had talked about earlier. But then also to respond, redress, actively cultivate equity, and then to sustain those efforts. So I know we're only talking about audits, but even within an audit, I think so much of how we communicate with people and the questions that we ask and the topics that come up, even just through audits, we're able to still leave people, whether it's students or families or staff, the skills to be able to do these 5 things. And then obviously we have trainings that we could do afterwards, but we're not somebody that's just going to come in and like do our thing and give you a report. Like we do in any way that we have contact with adults and youth, be able to give them that ability to work towards equity themselves. So partnership, what would it look like? So it's a commitment to action while valuing dynamics. We do understand that this work often comes with a lot of hesitation, a lot of reservation, and we get it. People's lived experiences, if you're looking at equity work, it's either this blame and shame or it's this, yay, let's just celebrate diversity. And neither one of them really move change. And so we understand that there has to be something where people feel comfortable, they're vested in it personally, they get it, they understand the need, and they want to work towards creating amazing learning environments for all students. So we do get dynamics. We know that this work isn't easy and isn't readily accepted at times too. Collaboration, partnership, flexibility to meet the needs of your families and your staff. And the way that we do our report at the end is we call them champions and challenges. What's going well? What are some things that people, your stakeholders, have identified as areas of improvement? We make a recommendations. This is based off of decades of experience, both lived experiences, research, professional experience, and the experience of just being invited into schools and families and staff and conversations from across the country. And then we followed up with professional development. So some of the audit options, again, you have this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We do paper or online surveys, especially during COVID. Super easy to just have these available to families. We also have focus groups that we like to do, and we can bring in translators as well if language is a barrier. Super flexible on time. We understand that not everybody can do a focus group during the school day, and not everyone can do it in the evening, so we can vary that based on students and family and staff needs. Individual interviews, we typically kind of put those in with the focus group times so that it's a good, easy schedule in a day. But we do recognize that sometimes districts want just one-on-one interviews, and people feel safe and comfortable in that capacity versus being in a focus group. We also do site visits. And these are really interesting because there's so much that we can pick up and we can point out that is really unintentional, but really makes a big impact. So for example, I was just at a school district. They were shut down because of COVID, but they still, they'd started off the year hybrid and then they went to distance learning. And so it just asked me to come check out their school, check out their campus, and just said, what is the feeling you get when you walk in? And as I was walking in, they had a sign for a yearbook pre-order, and it said, order your yearbook by like November 15th and save $20. So something as simple as that, where the intention is great. Like, yes, you want your families to feel engaged. You want them to order a yearbook. You want them to do it soon so that it benefits everybody. But what message does that send to our students who can't afford a yearbook and who are struggling socioeconomically? We're rewarding those who can afford and readily have money available, whereas students who have to save and maybe even wait until after the holidays to pay, they're now having to pay a higher price. So little minor subtle things like that, where unless you have that lived experience or unless you've had somebody tell you about it, you might not recognize it. So how can we kind of eliminate those even subtle barriers? And so that's our site visit. We can do it virtually as well, but we do prefer to come visit and just walk around and have conversations. Curriculum analysis and policy analysis, like that's a really big piece as well. Like we just take existing documents, and again, we operate from this notion that it's all made with good intentions, but sometimes things happen, or you have word or language that people don't realize is a barrier. And so we sit and we use our team to analyze different documents and then just make recommendations of, sometimes it's just as minor as word changes, and other times it's completely rewriting something so that it truly is more equitable. And then we do have a summary report at the end. So again, champions, challenges, recommendations. We can do that informally. We can do school board presentations. Sometimes we get asked to do community presentations. So we invite the community to come and hear and then kind of collaborate at that point too. So that just varies on what you want and how much you want to involve your extended and broader community as well. Professional development. So at Equity Literacy Institute, while we do enjoy doing audits and helping districts see what they don't know, we maybe feel like Hudson Schools is probably like most school districts across the country, where you do have issues of homophobia, you do have issues of sexism, of racism, and we can probably safely predict what some of that is going to be. Granted, we don't have the qualitative stories that go along with those. So we do enjoy doing audits. We think they're necessary, but our heart is also really in the professional development. And it's like, okay, so we know this exists. We know that you have your champions, you have your challenges, but these are some topics that we want to do for that ongoing professional development, and really creating ways to sustain equity efforts. And so staff, students, families don't feel like it's a one and done, or it's a checklist on a box. Like, what can we do to make sure that people feel empowered and that you have a whole bunch of equity warriors in your district who are ready to take this on and continue to lead for change? So these are some of the topics that we do. We also do trainings with youth, even as young as elementary school, on addressing inequity, something as simple as asking questions or asking students to clarify when they hear something that doesn't sit well with them. Okay, so with that, I can take questions. I know I'm like looking at the time. I'm like, I think I might be there. And then I end with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who will lift my ancestors up, of that be the change you wish to see in the world. And that truly is something that we believe in. If we're going to be invited into your district, we certainly want to model best practices, just even something as simple as how we engage with your students and your staff and your families.
Thank you for your presentation. I guess I would lead off the questions by asking, how many districts do you see of our size, roughly 5,400 students that have equity coordinators? And do you see that position being something that we would need to have on the ground at the conclusion of the audit, during the audit, or something that you would look at as maybe not necessarily mandatory, but a recommendation you might make?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on who you ask, but personally, I do think that while an equity coordinator is great, it's certainly a symbolic gesture. At the cabinet level, it shows people that you have somebody that's focused on that. I've also seen other models that work really well. Sometimes it's really hard to burden one person as like you are the equity coordinator and you have to deal with all of the stuff that's happening, because what that does sometimes is it enables people to kind of step back, and it allows equity to be seen as a separate component versus really engaging your teaching and learning, engaging your curriculum specialists, everybody in your district, to be able to look at things through an equity lens. And so instead of entrusting one person to kind of manage that responsibility, I spend a lot more time doing professional development in schools. I've seen places where there are equity specialists in each building. So it's a teacher on special assignment, or it's a teacher it's a stipend role. And then that way there's like a local connect with staff in a building or with families where they can say like, okay, here's somebody who's going through extensive training that we can turn to. So yes, I think an equity coordinator is a great option. I don't think it's mandatory. It's obviously a good position to have, but I would hesitate to recommend it if that's going to be your be all. Like, hey, we hired an equity coordinator and now we can all continue to do what we do, how we do it, and not work together for that systemic change.
And your different services you provide include that pretty wide range on curriculum analysis and policy analysis of 2,000 to 10,000. Can you give some idea of a district our size, what that might be, whether we'd be closer to the $10,000 end or the $2,000 end?
Yeah, so with curriculum analysis, it really just depends on how much you want us to analyze, right? And so like we were just with the school district and they're like, we want you to read through our elementary handbook, our middle school handbook, and our high school handbook. And I was like, that's awesome, I can do that. But with a lot of equity work, you just start to see patterns. And if I just take one of your handbooks and do that instead, and then work with your staff to kind of show, hey, here's some changes, here's some ways to look at this through an equity lens, then you all can be empowered to do your own other two handbooks. So the volume and the range of costs depends on how much you give us to analyze and the time that it would take to do that. So policy, if you're like, we want you to look at all of our policies versus like, hey, here's 4 policies that we see being utilized often with student suspensions. Like, can you look at these and tell us how we could look at this through an equity lens? That's a little bit less of a cost than a whole bunch of documents to analyze.
And your time period from time of retention to the time that you give the report to the school board, is that more along the lines of 2 months or is it 6 months?
It is what you want it to be. So if you're like, hey, this is what we need you to do and this is the time frame, we can get it done. Like, we're pretty flexible with that. And I do personally, I'm somebody who thinks like our students can't afford for us to wait to really figure things out and have it perfectly packaged before we start looking at things differently. And so while it is stressful for us to get requests of like, hey, here's the work we want you to do and we want you to get it done in 2 months, we also, again, like we're really youth focused, and we know that that's what's best going to benefit your students and your families and your staff. And so it really varies on how much you give us, but we do have that sense of urgency when it comes to doing this type of work.
The percentage of your work that's done with K through 12 school districts, public school districts?
Shoot, I would say, like, I don't know for sure, but I would say probably at least 75%. The rest is nonprofits who work with youth, or businesses that work with youth. So schools are kind of and educators is kind of our passion and purpose and our expertise.
And the number of audits you do at any one time?
Well, we have a pretty good team of people. So we have multiple audits that are happening at the
I'm
same
sorry,
time.
what was that?
Nope, I'm sorry. I said we have multiple audits that happen at the same
Okay.
time. We have a pretty big team of people. This one in particular, if Hudson would probably be myself, Paul, and a principal colleague of ours that works and does it when he's not being a principal. So yeah.
I think board member Heather has a question.
Thanks so much for your time, Seema.
Yeah.
So it looks like your audit is really focused on school culture and student experience. What I didn't see referenced in your audit was, for example, looking at student achievement gaps, looking at disciplinary records and differences there. Is that not a part of your audit? Is your audit really more focused on that experience piece, or would you get into some of that data?
No, we definitely get into that data too. And we actually have a list that I can send you to of standard questions that we ask data specialists in each district to pull. So we'll just ask for summary charts of access to honors classes, access to advanced classes, suspensions. We look at students who start in September or who maybe move to alternative settings, attendance, behavioral referrals. Where are those referrals happening? Is it in the classroom or the cafeteria? And so we do that as well extensively.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Rob?
Hi, Seema.
Hi.
Hi. So how many years, and maybe I missed this and I apologize, but how many years has your business been in operation? And do you have a rough idea how many school districts you've done this audit work with?
Yeah. It's a good question. So here's truthfully, and it's funny when you use the word business because we don't consider ourselves to be like a business. We're not going to give you this. I don't have like a presentation of all of us standing in front of people, and we don't have our own commercials for our business. We actually are all educators who do this because we're super passionate about it. So I know Paul has been with the Equity Literacy Institute for over 20 years. I've been with them for the past 12 years, and he would probably be the one to tell you like how many people we've worked with, but in any given school year, we have like dozens of, whether it's individual schools, whether it's districts, whether it's a one-day training. Well, I can just tell you, so since September, what are we in? September, October, November, 3 months, like personally, I've done probably about 15 different trainings. But again, like I said, we really, since it is kind of more grassrootsy, like we are there for our clients. And so we don't just do training and leave. I know Nick had asked for references and I kind of hesitated because I'm like, hey, we're not trying to, we know our educators are working so hard. And while references are good, obviously we know you need them, but we also don't want to burden people with like trying to sell us. That's not what we do. And so I did give him a reference for the Neenah School District, which is a district that we've worked with to do some trainings. And Chad, one of their, I don't even know what his official role is, but he's constantly just sending us emails and it's like, hey, I want to do this. And what do you think? And so we really value that and that relationship. And we're super just vested in making sure that you all get a great experience. And at the end of the day, again, it goes back to students. If we're going to be meeting students and families and staff members, we want to make sure that we're helping you as much as we can so that when we leave, they feel good about what they've offered and what they've shared with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Since you can just drive over from Minneapolis, does that reduce your on-site costs?
It does. Yeah. Since I drive over there like once a month, like my son is 16 and he's learning how to drive. And I'm like, let's go to Hudson. And so the Dairy Queen is there. Like we have a Dairy Queen like 4 blocks from our house, but we drive to Hudson to go to Dairy Queen every now and then. But yes, you would not have to pay travel fees for us to do this work.
Great.
Sue?
All right.
Excuse me,
Sue?
yes, very good, Sue. The ethnographic observations, that really intrigues me. How does that often corroborate like what you gain from gathering students together to share their stories, or
It
does it
does.
relate better to curriculum focus, or what does it offer? What do you get from doing that?
Yeah, it's kind of both. It typically does go well with what students say. And oftentimes, so like I did work in the Baraboo School District. And when we did some focus groups, we had students that said, like, we don't see ourselves in the school. Like we walk in and there's nothing that, and this is a certain demographic of students. And like, there's nothing that jumps out at us that speaks to us. And so then when we walk through the school, we're walking through and looking at it through that lens. And again, I think so often, like, unless you truly take the time to talk to students or understand or look with that critical lens, you don't even see what you don't see, right? And so to walk through and say, like, yeah, you're right, like we get, because we don't see any visuals of this, or we don't see any like visuals that highlight or share achievements for this particular demographic, right? And again, I think a lot of this is just common. It's not something where it's like, oh, like how dare you? It's just a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And so when students share things, when families share things, and then we go in a building or we look at a site and we're like, yep, like did you maybe like not see that, like, for example, this one, the school had like a trophy case as soon as you walked in, and it was for like all the male sports. And so we were just kind of like, like where are all the female sports, right? And so they're back in the art wing, and just simple things like that you might think don't make an impact, but students know it, they see it, and they have a visual representation of not feeling validated.
All right, excellent. Any other questions? All right, Seema, thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, and
Thank
good
you
luck.
very
And I'm
much.
super excited that you're even taking this initiative on, and I think it's going to be great, regardless of who you go with. So
Well,
thank you.
anytime you want to be a cheesehead, come over.
Thank you for.
No, I'm
thank
not
you
quite
for-
there. No, I would not quite. I said I like Hudson. It's not a
Yeah,
general
well,
Wisconsin thing.
You get over here on the good side of the river, and that's everything's a little bit better on this side. But thank you very much. We appreciate you
Thank
taking the
you.
time, and I'll be in touch.
Yeah, sounds good. Have a good night,
Thanks.
everyone. Bye.
I think that we've been going for about 2 hours, but we have only one request to speak. So Scott, do you want to do that now? All right.
On the mic, yep, please.
My name is Scott Ellingson. I live at 718 6th Street in Hudson. I'm also a teacher and a parent. I just want to, I know that you received written information about this today, but I think it's really important to acknowledge publicly. And I'm just really proud of 52 middle school teachers today who signed a petition for the following request. The Hudson Education Association requests that the HSD Administration and Board of Education decouple 7th and 8th grade from the early childhood 4K to 9th grade section of the HSD school closure matrix. 7th to 8th graders should return to their previous grouping with 10th to 12th grades. Hudson Middle School will be significantly safer if, at a minimum, 7th and 8th grades return to hybrid learning. Visual learning for 7th and 8th, 10th through 12th grades would be even safer. So again, 52 middle school staff signed that today. And again, I'm just really proud of them. And basically, when, 2 board meetings ago, you held firm and did not make what we consider dangerous changes to the metrics. Last meeting, you made a dangerous change. And we were very, very concerned. Hudson Middle School teachers are very concerned because as we saw with all the information earlier, it's the old people, the non-kids that are at risk in the building. And then of course, we don't know what's flowing in and out of the school asymptomatically to families in the community. So we just think it's very important that you reconsider that decision and that you change that as soon as you can. You know, people are, you know, they felt blindsided by that and just really concerned about that. We're also confused about, you know, the district saying things like teachers can't meet in certain size groups. They have to do that virtually while we go and pack, you know, repack the middle school full with students every day. So we're concerned about that. There's a real discrepancy there. I know there's some really good letters that were written on, and we would, if it weren't for the time change, we would have people here speaking, not just me again. Trust me, I was intending not to speak, not to have you hear me again, or you see me way too much. I know that. So anyways, we just got to be alert to the silent, what they say, well, I heard on the radio, the silent pandemic, especially in the 12 to 20 group of these stealthy, healthy people that we don't know what's happening. And we got to keep people safe. And like I've been saying lately, the county numbers, that's the weather report of icy roads. Okay, it's saying, hey, stay off the icy roads. Our numbers in the vertical column of those that are sick, those are the cars in the ditch. That's after the fact. Let's not wait for the cars to get in the ditch. Let's listen to the weather report about the icy roads and keep our staff, families of students, and students safe. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, I will we'll take a 5-minute recess and then reconvene. Call the meeting back to order and turn it over to Dr. Olet to give us the COVID-19 operational update.
Yeah, so one of the things that was going to happen earlier tonight is Dr. McGinnis was going to speak as he's on the Health and Human Services Board for the county as a medical advisor for them. And so he wasn't able to come tonight and speak and answer questions, but he did send a little video message. And I told him I would play it. This isn't like a public comment portion. It's because we actually invited him to come in and talk. And so that's what makes us a little different than some people have asked, well, why don't you play videos from public comment portions? That's been the kind of the big difference between it. So everybody all right? That's just somebody choking on a little water. So just for people out there, it's not anything COVID related, just purely wrong pipe. So, all right, we'll go ahead and start this, and then we're going to go into my my COVID operational update. So,
good evening. My name is Paul McGinnis. I'm a resident of the Hudson School District and have 3 now adult children educated through the district. My former primary care practice encompassed 30 years in this community. I wish to acknowledge Dr. Olet, the district staff, Chairman Johnson, and members of the school board for all your efforts during this extremely difficult, unanticipated, and challenging time. Your diligence on the behalf of the students, staff, and our community is appreciated. First, I acknowledge evidence that in-person education is the best option for most students. Hybrid is second, and full virtual learning is the least desirable. It is also known that adolescents can become ill with this disease and can transmit this disease, frequently with little or minimal symptoms. Keeping them in school for part of the day in an environment that helps mitigate community spread may also provide a benefit. Younger children may also be infectious, but are less likely to be a source of widespread infection. Fortunately, when our youth become ill with this virus, they are less commonly hospitalized or develop severe symptoms. Second, I understand that prior to your last meeting, some members of the community interpreted comments I had made at the last Health and Human Services Board meeting in October as supporting a full resumption of in-person education or a significant reduction or relaxation in the district's mitigation strategies. This is a misinterpretation. My comments were intended to highlight the results of your efforts with limited in-school transmission and the fact, as I understand, most cases in the Hudson School District were the result of community spread, not spread within our classrooms. This is good news in that it demonstrates the impact of the recommended public health measures in reducing disease transmission. My comments were intended to be a call to action for our community to support your efforts, as well as supporting similar mitigation strategies elsewhere in the community so that our schools are able to maintain in-person or hybrid education as long as possible. I am gravely concerned our community is letting our schools down. Third, at your last meeting, you moved 7th and 8th grade to the elementary profile. I cannot agree or disagree with this. The evidence related to young adolescents and COVID remains limited, but you are best positioned to make that decision in concert with public health and the state recommendations. You also changed the metric to decrease the impact of community spread. This represents a more aggressive move, and again, there is simply not enough evidence to allow certainty either way. Your ongoing careful monitoring of the situation in the schools and the community, combined with the flexibility to adjust as circumstances change, is what is needed during this pandemic. Finally, further relaxation of the metric would be quite risky with the onset of winter, the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays, as well as the dramatic increase in spread in our community. Also, this would not be the time to change any of the standards related to masking, distancing, isolation, or quarantine. While these are a burden, they are the best tools you have to protect all concerned to the best of your ability. So to be clear, it is up to us as community members to support our schools, students, and staff by not holding in-person gatherings, masking at all times unless we're home, and diligently practicing social distancing. Our schools are doing their part. We, as the community, can and should do ours. Thank you.
all right. And I just, I talked to Dr. McGinnis earlier today, and trying to work through what are the best next steps for us as a school district. Because as he said, it's hard to know. We don't have any clear hard facts that for sure we're good to do this or for sure we shouldn't do that. I mean, and a lot of what we're doing is trial and error as we try to work through some of these things and trying to make adjustments as we work through this. Tim, if you could share my slide deck that I had brought up. If we go to hold on, it's coming up. If we go to the next slide, there's been some information, people have been asking, how can we be more transparent with information? This is all the information I'm continuing to give information. We have a couple slides here. We have a total of just about 6,000 staff and students in our buildings right now, of which since the school year has started, we've had about 103 cases. And of those 103 cases, 66 of them have been student cases and 37 have been staff cases. As we look at that, 84 of our 103 cases have recovered and are back. We do have about 19 active cases right now in the district, and that's across the district. One of the things that's interesting to point out is our total close contacts. We've had 614 close contacts across the district since the first day of school, and so close contacts is one of the biggest challenges that we have as it relates to students and staff and keeping buildings open and keeping things going. But as we talk, we're going to talk about in a minute, and Ellie talked about a little bit earlier tonight. There has been a shift as to who's going to be identifying close contacts as it relates to school cases and who's going to be notifying those individuals. And I'm going to go through that. I think it's important to know that we have had 0 student deaths or staff deaths related to COVID. We have had one individual that was hospitalized related to COVID, but has since been released. I know sometimes there's misinformation out there that we've had a dozen or 2 dozen or whatever it may be, but that's just not true. I checked with our school nurses and HR departments today, this afternoon, to make sure that, to the best of our knowledge, this is what we have for our data as we move forward. Can you go to the next slide, Tim? So new cases by 2-week count. So I think something to kind of keep in mind, and we are sharing a lot of data here. It doesn't look like much, but this is a tremendous amount of data. And, this is just kind of a one-stop look at where all the cases have been in the district and when they've kind of come in the 2-week periods. And so the 11 hasn't happened yet. So this is up through today's date, but our reporting period will be on Wednesday, the 11th, coming up. But as you can see, we've had 55 cases since school started at the high school, 14 at the middle school, 4 at Rock, 6 at Prairie, 10 at Holton, 4 at North Hudson, 2 at Rivercrest, 4 at Willow, and we have had 4 cases at the Administrative Service Center. Couple things to keep in mind. What is interesting is, as we look at cases, as we look at, do we go into hybrid, do we stay face to face, do we pull in, do we pull out? We have had some different buildings that have risen and some that have come back down on their own. Holton, for example, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, where the decision was made to keep Holton face to face, even though we were about a 0.06 above on the old matrix. And what we saw over the last couple of weeks is because our cases at Holton were tied to the community spread that Dr. McGinnis talked about, it did start to calm down. And as you can see in the cases at Holton, it's kind of gotten itself back to where we like to see it, where there's not any cases. But even in the previous 2 weeks, it dropped down to 2. And so it doesn't mean that we weren't concerned about it, but it did start to drop down. I think something else that's important to consider is at the middle school, the 2 different the 4-week segments that we were in hybrid for 7th and 8th grade were the 2 weeks prior to 10/14, the 2 weeks prior to 10/28 is when we were actually in hybrid for those. You can see we had 3 cases in the one set of the 2 weeks, and then 6 cases in the second set. And then right now in the current 2 weeks, we've had 4 cases, but again, we still have tomorrow to go. Tomorrow's the last day of the reporting period, and then we report out on the 11th. And so as of right now, with adding 7th and 8th grade back to the middle school, again, it doesn't show any significant increase in cases. However, I think the thing that we're going to be watching most closely is going to be the next 2 weeks, because it's the amount of time that kids are in school as we move forward. The high school continues to be a challenge for us. As we look at it, our student cases at the high school have not been tied to spread amongst students within the normal day. We did have several staff members that ended up testing positive that were kind of tied back to an activity, and we're continuing to monitor that. That's part of, I think one of the speakers tonight talked about, we had put out a memo talking about we want staff to refrain from certain gatherings and things along those lines. And that really what it was is, we're having staff that were getting together and eating together without the barriers in place. And so, which we believe might have led to some of our cases. And so, as we continue to work, so, we know that as we have kids in our classrooms, that it's a necessary thing for us to have kids in our rooms, and we might not actually be able to get the full 6 feet between each one of them. However, when we do have situations that we can control that we don't have to have, which is staff related meetings or staff get-togethers, and what we've put out is that we want to limit those gatherings, because those are things that we do have the ability to have the control over on some of those things. And so putting that through. The next slide, please. So this is a similar data I've showed in the past. So since school has started, we've had the 614 close contacts where people have had to quarantine because of being a close contact. Currently out right now, we have 150 close contacts. As you can see, the elementary has the highest number of close contacts yet. The elementary's had the fewest cases. And really, one of the things that hybrid does do for us at the secondary, has done for us secondary, is allows us to spread kids out more, which means we tend to identify fewer close contacts. However, having more kids in classrooms at the elementaries, although we have more close contacts out, we are not seeing a huge number of cases or things along those lines. And so, one of the conversations is always, when do you go to hybrid? When do you stay face to face? And, we utilize the matrix, but, for the 81 different people that are out related to the elementaries, it definitely does impact those 81 families. I mean, there's no doubt about it, especially when they're having to be home all day and what they do. But when we do go to a hybrid model or a virtual model, we go from impacting 81 families to potentially impacting 1,500 families at the elementary level. And again, that doesn't mean that we don't do it. I think our matrix, allows us to move into that direction. I think, as we continue to look at it, our active cases, you can see where our active cases sit right now. We have 8 current active cases at the high school, 4 at the middle school, and 7 at the elementaries. And we continue to track those things as well. If you go to the next slide. I don't know if Tim, if you can bounce between this and potentially the school closure matrix, but actually, why don't I just hit on this and then we'll go into school closure matrix real quick. So this link I have on here is CISA district. So one of the things the CISA is doing is they're asking us kind of on a weekly basis, how are we, what are we doing as districts? Are we in person? Are we not in person? Are we virtual? And so these are all the school districts in our CISA. You can kind of see, and it's a tough way to answer the questions, because it's, in person versus virtual and what percentage. So like, for example, when you look at the Hudson, I put us at 60 to 90% in person, because we, do have some of our high school students that are not in person every day. And, as we're looking at this stuff, so it would be hard for me to say that we are 90 to 100% in person, but also to go any less than that. So it's basically the way this looks is, anything more than, kind of that 50% in person, kind of 60% person for school districts are in the green. Anything less than 50% in person are red. And then you can see there's some that are kind of completely 50-50 where they're hybrid, K-12, but you can see the different districts. Some of the districts haven't responded yet. And you can also see some districts have already said certain weeks they're going to do virtual and things along those lines. But overwhelmingly, when you look across our CISA on the Wisconsin side, and it is very different than the Minnesota side, because the Minnesota side is, if I was to do the same look with Minnesota schools, it would look a lot different. It'd look probably a lot more red. It'd be a lot more virtual. And but the majority of our districts are running in-person instruction. I know there have been some districts that have put out information about switching to completely virtual in certain buildings for 2-week periods. It's similar to how our matrix works, because it goes by building, except as I talk with those superintendents, the biggest thing that has pushed them into having to go virtual has not necessarily been because they've had a huge number of cases in the buildings. It's been because they are having inability to staff their buildings because of close contacts and inability to get subs. And so we've been in a pretty good spot for the most part. Not that we don't have holes in our sub coverage or anything like that, but we have been in a really good spot up to this point in the year. And so it's allowed us to continue to have in-person instruction. If you could switch over to the school closure matrix, Tim. Yes,
Nick,
go ahead.
while we're transitioning, I noticed Shell Lake has a red box far out, and I've been asked by a couple parents if we've considered doing all virtual, like for an extra week after winter break, just to give that extra period of time after the holidays. Has there been conversation about that between superintendents or at our cabinet level? And what are your thoughts on that?
We spent a lot of time talking about that as conference superintendents and then as CISA superintendents. The biggest concern we have, and we even talked about it this morning on the St. Croix County Superintendent call with Public Health, is the one thing where we know mitigation strategies. Is that it? Is that the updated one? The one thing that we know with our mitigation strategy, when kids are at school, we're enforcing them. And so one of the things that came up consistently with superintendents across the county was, if we start going to all virtual, and not necessarily because we're having issues in our buildings, is that going to drive spread up because we're going to have kids that are going to be gathering more outside of school? I thought, kind of as we looked at, and I had said something when we were looking at Ellie's data, you see kind of a drastic increase in number of cases when you see 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. It's almost as if when they get their driver's license and they have a lot more freedom, you're starting to see there's a lot more interaction outside of the school day. So one of the concerns that we have, superintendents have had, is the less time we have kids here is the more time spent not necessarily following the mitigation strategies that CDC has recommended, St. Croix County has recommended. And it does give us some sense of pause. And because we haven't seen a whole lot of kids bringing it and then spreading it to other kids in the building, not that that can't happen, and it absolutely can, or it could happen where it spreads staff. It's just, we don't have conclusive evidence one way or the other. So as of right now, not going down that path, not seeing, as you saw on that list, not a lot of school districts are planning on going down that path. Shell Lake was one of the districts that had said, yep, we're going down that path ahead of time. Absolutely. Other questions about some of the data before I get into the metrics and talk about it a little bit? Go ahead, Bob.
Have we seen in the middle school especially, but anywhere in our district, more IDL requests? Has that increased because of what we did in the middle school,
Dave,
2 weeks ago?
Have we had more IDL requests because we changed our matrix? Do you know?
I have not heard specifics. When we ran the numbers, they were relatively consistent, hadn't seen a big spike, but we haven't asked that question specifically. I can find out and see what happened, but nothing that was reported to me, and typically they keep me pretty informed.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, Carrie.
of the 614 close contacts, do you know how many of those resulted in a positive case?
So the close contacts, because the close contact list it's an interesting list because We also will get added to our close contact list if a child is a close contact of a positive parent or a positive sibling. So let's say there's a positive case in their house, then they get, because public health wants to let us know that, hey, this child shouldn't be at school because they're a close contact. When we look at our school contacts purely related to school, so their only interaction is the fact that they sit next to each other at school, not any, anything else related, or, they interact at school. We've had very few, if any, actual close contacts related from kid to kid. Like Johnny sits third hour English here, and all of a sudden the 3 kids around him are now testing positive because he was positive. We have not seen that at all in the buildings. And that's what I think Ellie talked about, and Dr. McGinnis. Not saying it couldn't happen, or not saying that there's not asymptomatic spread related to that. Just saying, yeah, we don't know how many of the close contacts are getting tested. But of the ones that are getting tested, we're not seeing a high positivity rate as it relates to school connections. Yep. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So we're still reporting to the county as we have to, positive infections, but if they're not contact tracing anything, they're really doing nothing with it. Correct?
So it's actually the other way around. So the positive cases actually go to the county first, and then they let us know. But what happens a lot of times, because of the way that WED system is set up, the Wisconsin, is it Wisconsin epidemiology, something site, because the way it's set up, sometimes there's a little bit of delay. We know sometimes before it goes into that system, because a parent will get the call from, let's say, Hudson Physicians, or they get the call from, Alina or something, and said, hey, I just got a positive result for my kid. And they'll let us know right away before, it even goes from the lab to their system. So what we do is, when we put out the letters on positive cases, we always verify that through public health that yes, it's a positive case through public health, because they do get that. And then we work through the close contacts, and our nurses really spend a lot of the time working through our close contact list. So, which brings up, go ahead, Sue.
Oh, no, go ahead. Finish.
Well, it just brings up the point, that Ellie talked, because St. Croix County is moved into crisis care mode. They have basically asked school districts to handle close contact tracing, which means that although they will be contacting positive cases, St. Croix County still contacts, I think, the positive cases. However, anything that's related to the close contacts is determined by the school district. So they'll say, and we're only looking at it from a standpoint of close contacts within our building. So it's not as though we're going to contact trace, if, let's say for a child that happens to play, a basketball game for an AAU team on the weekend, we're not going to contact trace all the teams that they played or anything like that. We're really looking at, okay, who are their close contacts that we would have to put out and have quarantined that are related to the Hudson School District. And what public health asks when you test positive is, please notify your close contacts, anybody you've been in close contact with since you've been 2 days prior to when you were symptomatic. Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember when we started in September, was it something like 11 or 13% of our teachers were doing teaching from, not being in the classroom, but teaching from a remote site?
Well, all of our teachers are teaching normally in the classrooms, but
Okay.
we had about 13% of our kids that were doing IDLs. At
Oh,
about
it's the kids, 13%.
about
That's where
13%
the
of our
number I'm
kids.
remembering. Okay, so just any updates on how teachers are feeling about this, or what are they doing to improve their sense of well-being in the classroom, and how's that dynamic working?
And I can talk on one level, and Dave might be able to provide some additional feedback. So I can talk from a personal level. My children were quarantined as close contacts as it related to me as being a positive case. And so they did spend an entire week in IDL. And I can tell you the experience that we had from my kids' teachers was absolutely nothing short of phenomenal. Was it perfect? No. Did it have to be a tremendous amount of work for our staff? Absolutely. But what our teachers were able to do with my first grader, fourth grader, and eighth grader was nothing short of amazing. And our teachers, if that is indicative of what we're seeing across the district, it is some phenomenal things happening for our kids. But there's no doubt in my mind, it has to be extremely stressful, extremely difficult, and a lot of work. I mean, I don't think anybody is sugarcoating that as we work through it. But it was amazing that, as I, anecdotally, as I looked at my own kids as they work through this process, to be able to not really skip a beat, to be able to stay in with their classes, and then be able to return to school today and be able to kind of be right where they left off has been really quite impressive, the way the teachers handled that. And it was the teachers that did the outstanding job. I don't know, Dave, if you have. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'll respond to a couple of questions. So first, to Bob's question about how many students had selected IDL since the metric change. According to the middle school administrative team, about 8 to 10 per grade level since that change between now and then. Now, having said that, we don't know if that is because of the metric change or because close contact, could be a variety of reasons, but about 8 to 10 per grade level. And to Nick's point, yeah, I think it is indicative of all teachers doing an amazing job of keeping this moving forward. It is amazingly challenging. I've mentioned this before, but the way that when teachers sort of synthesize it and describe what makes it so challenging, it's the divided attention that is very difficult. And that's exacerbated as students come in and out. We're doing a great job. Teachers are doing an amazing job of being fluid, flexible, really responsive. So a student is out, and within usually a day, they're up and running on IDL. That is becoming more challenging as we're seeing more ins and outs. As a student or as a teacher tries to respond to that change on the fly, it can be very difficult. It is not as easy as going home and logging on. There's the sharing of materials. There's assessment information. There's a lot that goes into it that I think on first blush gets lost. So that is challenging. We know, I would say that the teacher's experience in large part is a microcosm of what's going on throughout society. Everything is really challenging right now, and emotions are rubbed raw. So when you face challenge and you're already feeling a little emotionally depleted, that is more challenging. So I think the experience of teachers runs the gamut, from some that are feeling supported, equipped, and relatively able to adjust, to others that are really struggling, and it's no fault of theirs. It's just a very challenging time.
Well, I guess to follow up on that, my question is the sustainability. I mean, if there's a possibility that we could be in this virtual or hybrid type model through the end of the academic year, my understanding is there aren't a lot of districts whose teachers are doing what our teachers are doing, who are simultaneously teaching students in their classroom while they are teaching students at home. And our teachers have stepped up in spades. Is this sustainable? Is it realistic to think that they can continue to do this in this stepped up fashion through the end possibly of the academic year?
Sure. So a couple things to that point. So one, we are going to relax the timeline. Essentially, we're going to, we want to under promise and over deliver on how long it will take to allow a student to flex in and out. Reason being, what's happening is we'll have a student or a parent that will call and say, I want to get set up on IDL. And by the time the teacher goes through all the logistics to make that happen, the student is back. So that adds a stress. So what we're saying now is the goal is within 48 hours, depending on caseload and intensity, may take up to 4 days. The other thing that's going to impact that, as local health providers are able to do rapid testing, that will actually help, because there'll be a greater level of certainty as we move kids in and out of the IDL experience. Now, I say this not to minimize the challenge at all, and I don't want anyone to misinterpret that the challenge is real. It is very challenging for all teachers. However, we are refining practices. So there's things that we're doing better supporting teachers, and then teachers are just getting better at it. So I think there's two opposing dynamics at play. There's the fatigue of doing it over and over again, but then there's also the skill that's being developed. It's just being better at doing it. Those two things we'll have to see. I think in terms of the sustainability, I think it is a sustainable plan as much as anything is sustainable in this world we're living in right now. However, it's our job to ramp up the support commensurate to that stress level. So as things become more challenging, we need to find ways to support teachers better. Part of that is just really actively listening to what's going on and learning from the responses. I'm going to share an example of something, and not to take over this topic. I want to commend the high school teaching and learning team, the instructional coaches and curriculum specialists, as an example of the way that support is ramped up. They were seeing that one of the greatest stressors that was being placed in the system was getting subs in as teachers were out for close contact reasons or whatever they might be out for. And especially in those situations when you have several IDL students. You have a substitute teacher walk in, could be the first time substitute teaching in the building, and they have to figure out this IDL situation. So they just stepped up without anyone asking them and created essentially a brand new system and support structure to allow subs to walk in and be successful. And the problem solving, the way they were approaching that is nothing to do with their typical job description. They said, this is the need. We have the capacity to do it. They jumped in to support. Those opportunities are going to continue to present themselves, but we just have to be really nimble, because the challenges we're facing right now, I will guarantee you will not be the same challenges we're facing in 2-3 weeks. They continue to change, they continue to evolve, and then we will adapt.
Yes, Rob.
Just quick, I don't want to lose Heather's or one of Heather's questions. Are we the only or one of a very few number of districts who are doing a hybrid model?
No.
No, I think what Heather was saying specifically was the way we're doing the synchronous IDL, which I think is not unique to us, but it is definitely not the norm. And that is where our teachers are stepping up in a way that most teachers are not. Now, when I say most teachers, other districts that don't have the same level of expectation of delivering instruction that way. And again, I don't want to gloss over this, but we know that teachers are really appreciating the personal connection they're having with their students. So even though it's very difficult, we're also hearing a lot of teachers saying, this is hard, this is stressful, but I love the fact that I still get to connect with all my students on a daily basis. So it's that balance we're trying to strike.
And if I could just say one thing about staff as well, is that I think we'd be remiss if we didn't think about the mental health impact on our staff for this year. That I think it's becoming cumulative. I mean, just like we all have our outside worries in our personal lives, and then layering this significant change in their job this year, and then increased cases, whether it's in the buildings or whether it's in St. Croix County. I think it's compounding. And now we're going into a holiday season that's typically stressful anyway, with an unknown time period associated with the COVID. What are they going to do? I think we're just seeing more and more staff having a hard time working through this, as one could certainly expect. But I think it's the mental health side of it. I think Aaron Shulkin and I are going to continue to talk of what we can do to better support our staff, because I think it's an important conversation that we have as we're going forward.
Other questions before I kind of talk about the matrix a little bit? Okay, so there's always conversations about the matrix. Is it working? Is it not working? We did make the adjustments. There's a couple things I want to point out. As we're looking at the numbers heading into Wednesday, it looks as though all the buildings will stay in their same instructional model, except potentially the high school. There is the potential with the high school to jump above the 20 case mark, if they hit to 21, then they would go virtual. Grades 10 through 12 and ninth grade would go hybrid. And I think, that's something to say about this new matrix is the old matrix wouldn't have been this responsive to the building numbers. I mean, they would have had to have more numbers to drop them into that situation if the county numbers weren't as high as they are. And so it is a challenge. But I mean, just in looking at, I'm just gonna let Heather in there. In looking at the matrix as we look at this, so the matrix is, and as we make adjustments to the matrix, it's never been how do we make adjustments to keep everybody in school all the time. That's never been what it's about. It's there's a very, like I said, there's a very real possibility that the high school could happen to go virtual for 2 weeks. And I think the thing that's good about the matrix, the way we have it set up, is that after 2 weeks, it's a restart, and they'd have the opportunity to come back again in hybrid and give it another shot versus being in virtual perpetually, for the rest of the year. And so, I think that is a something to keep in mind as we look at the matrix, as we utilize it, to take into account what instructional model each building will be in based on where they go. Go ahead. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not seeing any difference between.
It's an error
Okay.
on the left-hand column.
Okay.
Yep, so they were just copied, and so that is not correct on that left-hand side.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's showing the same numbers all the way down. Yeah, so basically the high school right now, as I think I showed you in the presentation, is at 16 cases. And at 21 cases, it kicks to virtual for 2 weeks. And so depending on how many cases we have tomorrow, if we have 5 or more cases, it will kick the 10 through 12 to virtual. It'll kick ninth grade into hybrid for 2 weeks. So, and as of right now, we don't have any intention of recommending anything different. Follow the matrix and utilize it that way. Go ahead, Heather.
So one question, I guess, for you and for the board as a whole, I've been wondering, and a couple of parents have asked, is so right now the top line ends at 50 plus. Is that really 50 forever? So if that number was 150, if that number was 200, so is there a level of county transmission that would make us, even at that top level of building spread, think that we would be doing something differently? Because I think that 2 weeks ago we were at 51-ish. Now we're close to 90. 4 weeks ago we were at 26. So it's not inconceivable that in another 2 weeks we could be at 150 or 200.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as of right now, we have not looked at adding additional columns to the right of the matrix. It really is a tough situation. I mean, so if we're sitting where we're having almost minimal cases in the buildings, regardless of what the county's doing, right now the recommendation is to continue to have
It'd be
instruction.
hard to make the case to pull them if there's not evidence of increased spread in the
Yeah.
schools.
And I think that's the biggest piece. It's not that we're not tracking or not keeping an eye on it, but we are seeing some districts that are on the eastern side of the state that are having burden rates almost double of what we're having. They're actually bringing kids back for the first time because I think they're realizing, oh my gosh, like you said, I mean, there's no real end in sight anytime soon with this. It's not like, okay, if we can just get to December 15th and then, we'll be able to get back to normal. And so it is going to continue to be a challenge. I think as of right now, we've kind of kept it at 50 plus, but if that's something the board wants to look at or have a bigger discussion on, that if the county rates get to a certain level, regardless of what happens in the buildings we close, that would be something that we would need direction from the board on.
Mr. President.
Yes.
So I mean, I feel like if we get to those numbers, like we get to 200 or 150, it should trickle down, and if it's not trickling down, then again, the mitigation plans that are in place within our schools are working. I mean, the statistics out there that show, and we heard this on our Rotary discussion this week. If you're wearing a mask, your chance of getting COVID is reduced by 50%. If the other person, if there's two of you or multiple people wearing masks, again, your chance of getting or contracting COVID goes down even greater at that point in time. So, I mean, I think it was discussed earlier tonight as well. I mean, not only do the kids need to be mindful of what they're doing outside of school and trying to minimize the activities that they're doing or the where they're spending their time, those in the community are not only our teachers, but our parents, to try and minimize this to keep our kids in school as much as possible. And I think that's the most important point is, what are we doing outside of the day-to-day to minimize the amount of contact that we have or the gatherings that we're participating in. And I know it's very difficult for a number of folks, especially coming up on holiday season. Will you see people? Will you not see people? Will you get together in person? Will you not? And those are going to be very difficult conversations and decisions for many families. But again, trying to keep our kids in school as much as possible. Hopefully, the amount of interactions and the amount of large gatherings that people choose to participate in are down this year. I mean, that's the only thing that we can hope for. We can't force people to do anything in that regard, but the less we're creating those environments, the better chance we have to keep our kids in school.
Well, and
I know that I see two board members that want to comment on that, but I want to piggyback because it's an excellent point, Bruce. And I took the better part of yesterday to finish the bottom third of the 700 plus emails that we got that I got on October 26th. And I just wish that every single one of those that were sent by parents, some were sent by parents that are also teachers in the district, begging us to stay in person as long as we can or hybrid, that I hope that every single one of them are going to be doing things over Thanksgiving and Christmas to minimize. Because for this to be successful and for our kids to get the best education they can, people have to do this voluntarily. We don't want to be in a situation where we have to close our schools because people are not doing the responsible things. So with that, Bob, you had a question.
Oh, I just, could you speak again as to if the high school 10, 11, 12 goes virtual from hybrid, what that does to other activities, sports and marching band and all that?
Yeah. And I think the way I would look at it is because the direction the board had given us was if a school is in session at any point or there's any type of face-to-face instruction, that we would continue activities. So if ninth grade is still having at least hybrid, then we would consider that building to continue to have their athletics and activities, even if 10 through 12 ends up having to go virtual. If the board would like to have a discussion about decoupling athletics from the matrix in general, and saying, we're going to not tie in-person instruction to extracurriculars, then we can absolutely have that discussion as well, or you can give us some direction. But as of right now, I just assume that since ninth grade would still be in school, at least part-time, that your original directive would stand, that activities would still go on until that building went completely virtual. If I'm misunderstanding or misinterpreting that, please correct me.
And like the Big Rivers Conference and different things like that, they haven't made any.
No, I mean, I think, as we've talked, and we have another conference superintendent meeting coming up on Friday. I can say that one positive with COVID has been the conference superintendents are meeting more often in the last 3 months than we've met probably in the first 5 years I was in the district. because we're all kind of wanting to know what each other's doing as we're trying to be on the same page. But I think right now, a lot of the districts are looking at still continuing potentially extracurriculars. And I think that's something that you're seeing in Minnesota actually quite a bit, where a lot of their high schools are virtual, but yet they're still doing all of their extracurriculars, so that there's some level of connection for kids if those are available. But we'll continue to have that dialogue with Big Rivers Conference. I can tell you right now, the way we left it on Friday was all of the Big Rivers Conference school districts were planning on having winter sports. Nobody was planning on delaying or pushing them back. We've had a pretty successful fall season, knowing that the winter season obviously is inside. We'll continue to monitor and make adjustments as needed. But the WIA has come out with guidelines for indoor sports, each individual type of sport. And all of the conference schools have committed to our athletes will be masked, even during competition, with really probably the exception of two different exceptions. One is swimming and diving. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the other actually being gymnastics, where the competitors would wear their mask all the way up to the event, take it off, set it on the floor, or, do their event. And the reason being is what we don't want to have happen is having a young lady that happens to be vaulting through the air and have a mask come up over her eyes or something along those lines, or be in a floor routine or something like that and have it do that. So, and they're not necessarily interacting with anybody. It's a very individualized sport. So other than that, though, the kind of expectation would be, even like for wrestling, that they would mask or wear a the gaiter or something like that, to the best of their ability, keep it on. But we also know how wrestling goes, and sometimes it's going to get pulled down, and that's somewhat of the risk that the wrestlers are going to assume by willing to participate in the sport. But basketball, we would expect, would continue to wear masks to participate in basketball, and then probably the same thing with hockey as well.
Heather?
So I too would like to piggyback on Bruce's statement, and especially, I know folks are watching. I think a lot of those 600 emails we got, Jamie, talked a lot about students and a lot about sports. But I think just to remind folks that we can't keep our schools open if our teachers are sick. And there are adults in those buildings and we need them. And thinking right now, to your point, Bruce, if the numbers go that high, we'll probably see them go in our schools too. We'll probably see them go with staff and then have to close. So I think, thinking about all of our activities in the months to come, I know there were some people who said, I'm willing to take that risk with my kid, or who said parents have a choice, they can pull their kids out. This is about our staff too, and about keeping our staff safe and keeping our schools open. And along those lines, I think then to what you were just talking about, Nick, initially, my mind had kind of been, well, if our kids can't be in school because of COVID, why would they be playing sports? If our kids are out of school because we can't staff our buildings, I think it would make sense to have a conversation about decoupling. I'm not 100% sure that I land there, but to me, it seems logical that we would look at that even if our numbers get so high that ninth grade is virtual as well, if the reason that we're virtual is because we can't staff our buildings, I could see, with all safety measures in place, that we would consider having extracurriculars continue, because we're in control of the environment and we know how important they are for our kids, just well-being. So
that's one of the things. I know, Bob, you have a question. One of the things that came up with conference superintendents and came up with both the county superintendents is, the one thing that we do know is when we are running the practices, when we're running the events, we are implementing mitigation strategies. If winter sports decides to, across the state, go away, the void will be filled with club sports. And then all of a sudden the ability to mitigate risk and things like that drastically changes. And, the one thing that we do know is, when we can stand firm in our commitment of whatever our expectations are, while we're running things, we feel like we have a better opportunity to control spread and things along those lines with kids participating. Because even if all of a sudden we say, okay, there's no more winter sports, to think that kids aren't going to play some level of club hockey or club basketball or club gymnastics or club, swimming or things like that, that's just, it's going to happen. Because what'll happen is those AAU programs, those club programs will just, they'll fill that void. And at least by us being able to have those events and have those things go on, we're able to kind of control those mitigating factors and what that looks like. So go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Yes, and yeah, I mean, if we can't staff the buildings, obviously that makes decisions for us. But one thing too, and if we do go full virtual, we lose the ability to show that our strategies are working and that the cases are low. So I think that's a big concern. Is then we just going by the county numbers. We have no way to track our in school infection rate. So when would we ever come back?
Well, so what would happen is after the 2-week period, we still get, like, for example, we still get, as you know, we talked about this, we'll get reports that an IDL student is positive. And so we would still get reports of positives, even if they're, not tied back to school. And if we could bring, so if we would still have those school numbers per se, or at least student / staff numbers, and applying the matrix and be able to start over again after 2 weeks. So the way it's set up is that at the very least, even if the county numbers stay extremely high, we'd be able to at least get back into hybrid for 10 through 12. The way the metrics is set up after being out for 2 weeks virtual. So not necessarily being in this perpetual virtual environment until the county numbers come down, because that's what the old matrix would have put us in. And that's what we believe the new matrix solves, is that after a 2-week kind of, I don't know if you want to call it cooling off period or whatever, easing period, then we're able to bring kids back and give it another try again. Yep. Other questions? And I think that the thing that's important to note on any of this stuff is that we don't take these decisions lightly, and that we are hearing what staff are saying. We understand their concerns. We do understand their concerns, and it's not that because we can't necessarily meet where they want us to go that their concerns fall on deaf ears. It's not that they fall on deaf ears, but we are trying to weigh a variety of different competing interests as we make these decisions and as we move forward. And so I think that's an important piece. It's similar to kind of even what David talked about with the way we're doing a synchronous environment. We're absolutely hearing what staff are saying about the challenges associated. We're trying our best to try to help them work through some of those challenges. But just because we continue down a synchronous model doesn't necessarily mean that we're not hearing where their frustrations are, or that we're not trying to do our best to eliminate some of their frustrations or some of their stresses. And it's the same thing as we look at 7th and 8th grade. And I know there's been different groups that have voiced via email and even the petition by as Scott said, by about 50 or so middle school staff members. It's not that we're not hearing those things. We are taking all those things into consideration. We're also weighing that against the benefits of having kids in face-to-face. We're also weighing that against what have been our past counts when we have been face-to-face. What does that look like? And all these different things, and trying to make the best decisions we can make as we move forward. But I just think it's important to note that we do hear what people are saying, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can always give them what they want. And that doesn't mean that we don't hear them, or that we don't appreciate the feedback or the input that we're getting from staff, from parents, from everybody involved, from kids. We're really trying to balance these things. A lot of times there's no real clear cut answer, is Heather even kind of alluded to, as it related to athletics and activities and things like that. There's not quite, it just doesn't play out quite as clear as or as easy as some people would like to think. And so I just wanted to hit on that. So any other questions related to COVID?
Well, and just a observation based on what you just said. One of the things that the board and the school district cannot have any control over are the individual fears, justifiable fears.
Absolutely.
That our parents have, and our teaching staff, because they're in there with 20 some kids and so on. But it does seem to me the trend I'm hearing from what you're saying and checking in with fellow superintendents and so on is that at least by having kids in person as best we can, maintain that. And our hybrid, we're in kind of a manufactured or set up way to have a control factor here, because they come to a school where desks are clean midday and partitions and so on, where there's many more unknown factors if they're totally at home in a learning situation. So I think we've spoke tonight to the positive aspects of what we're trying to do. That we can't protect everyone. We've already said that, but I think our mitigation practices are measurable.
I do just a final comment for me. And I still do think that, Nick, you talked about us doing what we can in classrooms to keep things safe. And I keep going back to, middle schoolers, especially those 7th and 8th graders, the older middle schoolers are old enough that they can independently learn from home in a hybrid model. And so, when we talk about what we're able to do and still continue to provide kids some level of in-person instruction, I think that those staff have a legitimate beef to say we moved away from what was safer for us and made it less safe for us, when in fact the hybrid model was something that was an option for us. And I know part of the challenge there was that rumor got out that we were going to, at the last board meeting, be voting to move everyone to 100% virtual. And so we got a lot of emails from people who were concerned about that. I can't help but wonder if the agenda item had been presented as it actually was, that we were looking at revising the matrix, that we might have had a different response from parents. I did hear from 2 parents who moved their kids, Bob, to IDL because they were uncomfortable with the decision. And they said, I feel bad about that because I can do that for my kids, but it doesn't protect the teachers. So, I hope that decision won't be made for us by having those teachers actually get sick and then us not be able to provide a hybrid, any kind of in-person instruction. But to me, that still feels like that was a miss.
Mr. President.
Yes, Rob.
Something I've heard from a couple of teachers and then again from Scott tonight about teachers being in the classroom with 20-something students, but then they're not allowed to congregate in their break rooms or whatever. Can you talk to that a little bit as far as why it's okay in one, not okay in the other?
Yeah, and I tried to touch on that earlier, which is really, there are certain situations that we can, that we can control a lot easier than others. And so, one of the things that, we talked about was, if you're going to have team meetings, instead of having them in a small conference room, obviously classrooms are open, move them to a bigger classroom or do them virtually if you can't. When it comes to eating in small spaces, we know that creates one of the biggest challenges because everybody has their mask off. I mean, and one of the ways we've chosen to mitigate that strategy as it relates to kids is we've put up a lot of plexiglass across the district if you've been in our buildings. And so, we don't, so if staff are getting together in small spaces and everybody's taking their mask off and eating, then we don't have that secondary mitigation method in place. And so, I think the majority of our staff understand that. I think the majority of our staff say, yeah, we understand where you're getting at. There are certain things that we need to do in order to educate all our kids. And there are other things that we just don't need to do. And we can definitely work through that. So I don't think it's a all or nothing, like to say, okay, since we're expecting, 24 second graders in a classroom, that should all of a sudden justify having a team at the middle school all take their mask off and eat lunch together in a small conference room. I think that the majority of our staff can look at that and say, I see how those are 2 totally different situations. And I could see how you could have different expectations without them being contradictory as we look through it.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I'd just like to respond a little bit. As far as my comment about staff determining, whether we go virtual or not, or Heather's comment about the families that chose to go IDL and felt that they weren't helping the teachers. I would say actually they are helping the teachers if they took their kids to IDL. I mean, that's part of the plan. That's part of it. It shows it's working to me. I mean, it did reduce some, and I don't want to be to be taken that I'm not hearing the teachers' concerns at all. I wouldn't want that, as I'm very concerned about the safety of our teachers and staff members. But I think we've been very responsive to this community, and we've been flexible, and I don't consider it a miss.
Well, and I think somebody raised the potentiality for some type of resurvey. I mean, you had mentioned that, Heather, and kind of in between since our last meeting. And maybe that would be something for another month or something that we looking into this, because I appreciate the fact, I mean, our parents want some consistency, but they also want to see flexibility for safety reasons. So it's a tough balance that we're trying to strike here. But I think it's a good one in that, for instance, the middle school, which is the one where we took the 7th and 8th graders and now included them with the 6th and 9th graders and the other elementary ages. They still, I mean, if they had an outbreak in the building, combination of staff and students of 15 and got to that point, then, they would be going to hybrid. But I think it's something that to consider, whether it's a month from now or whatever, to maybe ask the parents, how comfortable they feel. But we kind of see it in the self-selection too. And the common theme that I saw was that parents want to just maximize as much as possible the in-person learning. Everyone universally, including the staff, knows that that's the best for our students. It's just not easy for any of the 7 of us to have to, weigh the, putting our staff at risk with trying to put our students at risk of not getting good educations. And so I don't want to be striking that, opposition of those two groups. We want to try and maximize the quality. So
Jamie, one thing that I found myself saying to people is, I think we all agree that we want to provide some level of in-person instruction as long as we can safely do so. I think there's agreement on that. The differences of opinion come into safely and what does safely look like. And so I think this continued conversation, and as evidence emerges, new research to be able to respond to that. But I mean, we've all got the same desire to keep our kids as much as we can safely engaged in person in school, engaged in extracurriculars, because we know how important that is to them.
Bruce?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think the opportunity that we have is to continue to look at the data. And I think it's really important that we look at the data and what's happening in our school. And to me, if we would have seen a big jump in the middle school in the last 2 weeks, then I would have said we probably made a bad decision there. Now, it could still happen in the next 2 weeks, but we get to come back together and talk about it, which we all love doing. And we, we spend a lot of time on this, and I think we're all looking at it closely. And we have to be flexible in understanding what is happening and with the numbers, and yes, it's scary and concerning what's happening in our community, but we still have to put some trust in the fact that, wearing masks in our school is important. Having the plexiglass in place that we do in our schools is important, and it's helping and it's working. But, again, at any point in time, those numbers could change, they could grow, and we're going to be talking about it again, and we've got a chance to do something about it at that point in time. So, I think the changes that we made were good. As far as the sports go, I think you summed it up pretty well, Nick. To me, I think if we have at least some level of hybrid learning, we should continue to do it. I think we'll have to look again at the data to see if it makes sense to decouple it if we get to a point where we're all virtual. And on top of that, what are other schools doing? You know, what are other schools in the Big Rivers Conference doing? And are there the high risk sports and the low risk sports? I mean, I think the other thing that we've seen, and we had a lot of students write in about this as well, is those activities are you know, very important to those kids as well. You know, I mean, look at the soccer team, and they had a chance to go to state this year. Like, how exciting is that? You know, I mean, and what a great opportunity and experience for those kids to have that time together. So the more that we can create those environments for our kids is equally important to their mental health and well-being. So anyway, I think we get an opportunity to keep coming back together and talk about
Well,
it.
not even just on our regular schedule meetings, you know, I want the public to know too. I mean, the administration is monitoring this all the time. And if you saw some kind of big increase, you'd be calling us into a special meeting if we had to make a more quick adjustment than every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the important piece. I mean, and it is for some of the stuff. I mean, the closest we kind of got to that was probably when we were looking at Holton and tracking Holton with the original matrix. And, you know, we made the decision to keep them in face to face. It turned out to be the right decision, I think. However, you know, it could have went the other way. I mean, we could have picked up quite a few more cases. And so, you know, I think the same thing will follow with 7th and 8th grade. We're going to continue to track it. And I think the next 2 weeks will be very important as to what our caseloads look like in the middle school and our case counts, I'm sorry, and what happens with 7th and 8th grade. And, you know, I think if we can keep cases down, then I think we'll be in pretty good shape, you know, and knowing that, you know, it's all right to keep them where they're at. But if all of a sudden we start to see that spike, you know, we may be back with the board saying, you know what, we might need to move 7th and 8th grade back, or it might be that we need to move 6th, 7th, and 8th grade back into a hybrid model. You know, as we look at that, and the same thing with 9th grade, because we aren't just looking at what's happening in the buildings, we're also looking at what's happening at the individual grade levels. And, you know, one of the things that gave us, you know, some sense of confidence to bring 7th and 8th grade back was we were looking at the number of cases we were seeing in 6th grade, which were pretty low. And we were looking at the number of cases we were seeing in 9th grade, which were pretty low. And so, which all have been face-to-face the entire time with full classrooms. And so I think that's, you know, I think that's important to note. And that's what we were looking at. Not that we didn't have cases in those grades. It's just, we weren't seeing anything. We weren't seeing any disproportionately more cases in 9th grade and 6th grade than we saw 7th and 8th and 10th through 12th. If anything, we saw way more in 10th through 12th than any of them. And I think we've already kind of beat that horse into the ground about why. Go ahead, Carrie.
According to, as far as grade specifics, were the teacher numbers the same across all grade levels? Or were the 6th grade and 9th grade staff numbers higher? Or can you not answer that due to specifics?
I guess I don't necessarily, I mean, I would say it's kind of across the district. And, you know, we had, no, I would not say that we're having more staff in 6th and 9th grade out because they're positive as opposed to 7th and 8th and 10th through 12th. Andrea, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any outliers in terms of those grades as compared to others.
Yep. And just like the elementaries, I mean, it's same type of thing. I mean, the elementaries are in full every day with everybody. And so, you know, and those are the things that we're continuing to dig down in data. And some people ask, why can't you give us even more precise data, even more? And we have to be careful, because once we get to a certain level of specificity of the data, you can start to identify who the positive cases are. And that creates issues for us, both with FERPA and for HIPAA. Now, I, you know, willingly, you know, gave out the information tonight that I have tested positive, and then obviously I'm back, but not everybody wants people to know that, and not everybody are comfortable with that information being shared. And so I think that's an important piece of information. So we're trying to give as much information as we think is reasonable that is not going to put us in a situation where somebody could argue that they can identify individual cases or individual students or individual things. And we probably give a little bit, in a couple of slides, a little bit too much data, especially in our elementaries, because they've had so few cases. But, we're really trying to be as transparent as we can be to this.
Sue, did you have something?
No, I don't. I changed my mind. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the COVID report then? Okay, then we'll move ahead with agenda, and I'll take a motion for the consent agenda items with expenditures.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Rob.
move approval of the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,069,544.50.
All right, motion by Rob, second by Heather. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda with expenditure, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Next up, selecting WASB delegate and alternate delegate for state convention.
And I would say of the 112 people still watching us live, I would say that most of them were holding out to find out what you guys were going to select for
Yeah.
this topic. So I know that's a, so we would just need a motion for the WASB delegate.
And I've heard from Rob that he's willing to serve again. And is there?
Isn't that a board position? We could just.
Yeah. Call the question.
And well, we also need, I want to do it in the same motion with an alternate delegate who's willing to serve. This is again a virtual convention because it's not going down to Milwaukee. Okay, excellent. All right. Do I have a motion?
I moved that Rob is our delegate and Heather is our alternate.
Second. All right, Bob got in there on the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Thank you for being willing to serve in that capacity. Now I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. Please use the statutory language.
And just real quick, so you'll be adjourning from closed session. And so the recording of this meeting will be done after you go into closed session. So there wouldn't be a need for
After
people to stay on and wait.
I mean, it's done before we go into closed session.
Yeah, it's done upon you going into closed session, the recording will stop.
All right.
Because you'll take no action outside of the closed sessions after you, at the end of the meeting.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Carrie.
the board will entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E, to deliberate and select an equity proposal. Okay, that just disappeared. And thanks, Tim. Pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider the employment of a certified staff employee.
Second.
All right, motion by Carrie, second by Sue. All right. It gets tough with these masks, you can hear in certain directions, but all right. Roll call. Bauman.
Aye.
Brown. Hanson.
Aye.
Katas.
Aye.
Logland. Whitaker.
Aye.
Johnson. Aye. The motion carries. We will go into closed session and this will